All right, so here we go. Um, so today we're doing something, or tonight we're doing something a little bit different. Um, we are going to go over the Delphi murder case. Not really go over it. I mean, we're just gonna watch videos on it, but it's court TV videos. I was gonna watch another one, um, but the video I was gonna watch is a copyright video, so um, unfortunately, I can't watch it or show it. Court TV though is not. Um, we'll go back. Excuse me, into YouTube after the live and kind of just you know I'll link the videos to the live. But um, anyway, that's kind of what we're doing today. Is just going through and there's gonna be 4 different videos. One of them is um, each one Court TV put out earlier than the last. So like this video, the first one is from 6 months ago. The second one is from I believe 2 weeks ago. Um, the third one is from like 2 days ago or 3 days ago or something like that, and then the last one is going to be the verdict of the case. So the reason why I kind of wanted to talk about this and go over it is it's something I've heard about from numerous content creators. They made, you know, dozens of videos on them or on this case, or on this, murder, I guess. There it is. But, and it's always kind of like fascinated me cold cases. Just, for a very long time, I've just been fascinated with cold cases. And this is one of those cases. Basically, I think the first time I heard about it, I was like, how can anybody, um, how could anybody go out and murder, you know, a 13-year old, and I believe it was 13-year-old and 14-year-old, um, just little girls, just having fun on a day off of school, and it's just you know clearly tragic, but um, just like the psyche of people, it's just strange how they would think to do that. But anyway, it's just something that's fascinating me. Cold cases, and this is one that recently got you know solved. And after I believe this happened in 2014, and or 2017, and I believe an arrest was made like 2 years ago, and now they finally had a verdict decided um, yesterday. So um, clearly, this has been going on for a while. I believe they got the right guy, uh, mostly because he did confess to it, but um, there's just some numerous like avenues that go on in this case. So without further ado, let's get into it. The first video is called "The Case Against Richard Allen." Richard Allen is the guy, obviously, that committed these murders. So let's take a look at this case, and yeah, we'll start with the first video. think what I'm going to do is turn this up a little bit. I don't want it to be too loud for you guys, but I don't want it to be too quiet either. Obviously, clearly. Turn it up for me a little bit. Alright, let's get into it. Case against Richard Allen.
Joyce Williams.
Getting scared now. It's getting cold.
Liberty Rose Lynn German.
Missing, abducted, we don't know for sure.
Last seen at the High Bridge in Delphi, Indiana.
Delphi is just not one of those places where any of us ever thought that something like this would happen.
Despite that video, despite that audio, nothing happens, seemingly, for 6 years.
The judge did find probable cause for an arrest of Richard Allen. He's been charged with 2 counts of murder for the murder of Abigail Williams and Liberty German.
Richard Allen, you child murderer! Why did you do it?
No. They got the wrong guy. There's no way.
There are other people who were looked at for this.
Shame on you!
It's some sort of a religious sect/cult
Shame on you, Richard!
that follow Odinism.
Shame on you, Richard Allen!
I believe they sacrificed a girl and killed another one.
And law enforcement insists no one's ever been cleared.
Baldwin, can you provide any comment?
Journalism. It's time for you guys to start being journalists.
Delphi is a small town.
Beautiful. Looks like a beautiful place.
The downtown is 2 blocks. It has a main street, literally a main street, old courthouse, wonderful restaurants called the Stonehouse Grill, which has amazing breakfasts. And it just has that regular America, small town cliche almost flavor and feel.
Oh, that looks cool.
Downtown is surrounded by lots of fields, corn and soybean, and lots of farmland.
The historic trails of Delphi is a popular spot in town for people to go to. It's a little bit outside of town. It's just a beautiful place filled with trees. You could hear nature, you could hear the birds chirping. It's a very serene place.
I live pretty close to the trails. Dropping your kids off at the trails was just something that you did. It was just what kids.
Got like old, not old, but like look how much older she looks. So she was best friends with Abby and Libby, and obviously this is how long ago this was because they were 13 and 14 when they passed when they got murdered, and this was their best friend.
Did.
And she's obviously, you know, 20 something.
63 feet above Deer Creek.
The Monon High Bridge is not that serene. It's this old, rickety bridge, or it was at the top.
I wouldn't be walking across that anyway.
They're falling apart. It's, you know, you could look down, take a couple steps and look down and see a 100-foot drop below you.
I mean, it was a very high bridge. The name definitely applies. I grew up watching people post on their Snapchat stories, like going to the bridge to like read a book or things like that, and they'd have their feet like swinging over the edge.
That's insane.
My name is Cynth Rossi, and I was best friends with Abby and Libby. I first met Abby when we were in preschool together. I spent my entire childhood basically at her grandparents' home. We just loved being little girls and just sitting on my bed, reading magazines, playing with makeup. She loved playing dress up. That was one of our favorite things to do together. I I first met Libby when we were in classes together in elementary school. She just had such like a spunky personality. She was constantly saying the funniest things I've ever heard in my entire
Should turn this up a little bit.
I've seen this picture a lot. It was during one of her swim meets. She loved swimming and how much she was such an active kid. She seemed to never run out of energy. She was constantly going. The picture that I'm often cropped out of. So this was our solo and ensemble competition with the song Home on the Range that we could not agree how to play. And Abby's actually wearing a dress that my mom had gotten her for Christmas.
Oh.
I'll never forget that day, February 13th. It was around 2 p.m. I saw the picture of
Yeah, so
Abby
2017 this
on
happened.
my Snapchat stories, and I immediately just knew that something was wrong. Taken by liberty, it should have just been them being kids on a day off from school, but unfortunately turned into a lot more.
Central case, 2 missing juveniles. Liberty Rose Lynn German, last seen at the High Bridge.
If they're gonna be doing like these, I'm gonna probably switch to the side here. There you go.
In Delphi, Indiana, at approximately 1300 hours. Second juvenile, Abigail Joyce Williams. Subject was last seen wearing a gray zip up sweatshirt and a red shirt with a red shirt under it and jeans.
On the afternoon of February 13th, 2017, Abby and Libby were dropped off at the trails that lead to the Monon High Bridge. They were supposed to be picked up by Libby's father at 3 p.m. They never turned up. The search started around 5:30.
Whole upset, confused, obviously very distraught. Just worried. All I want to do is have the girls get home safe.
Yeah.
Missing, abducted, we don't know for sure. There's a cell phone tower, but the ping was last noted about 5 or 6 hours ago. They say the phone's now dead.
Word spread quickly that help was needed, that these girls needed to be found. Hundreds of people turned out and searched through the night. Becky Patty, Libby's grandmother, would say that you could see flashlights everywhere like stars in the sky, like fireflies. It was a full town effort.
Ravines, ditches, trash cans for phones, any sign of the girls.
I was like, I think one of them just like fell off the bridge and maybe broke their leg, and then the other one went down to help them and maybe they got hurt.
All options are on the table. Did they run away? Did they go to a party? Did they fall off the bridge? Did they get injured? No one had any idea what had happened to them, but the official search was halted that night and picked up the next morning.
The next day I went to school and it was just gloomy.
Hundreds of people showed up, searching all over the place. Hope was high, and then the word came.
I learned that Abby and Libby had been found when I saw everybody in the hallway just crying. No one said the exact words to me, and we just sat on our phones and watched the news headlines start to come in.
Ugh, man.
We have found 2 bodies about a mile east of town. We are investigating this as a crime scene. We suspect foul play.
They didn't identify them as Abby and Libby, but everyone knew.
So in a small town like that, I mean, I'm from a small town. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there from small towns. It's kind of just like, news like that comes out and everybody just knows,
Knew it was them. I wasn't in a position to hear it. I just was truly traumatized. Like my body was just in fight or flight. I didn't know exactly what all foul play entailed, but when my mom started to tell me someone hurt them and someone wanted them to die, for me it was so difficult to process.
Yeah.
News stations started showing up to my house. I couldn't enter my home without someone asking, "What happened? Do you have any information?" And I'm just trying to process the fact that my 2 best friends were just murdered.
Yeah, exactly.
Let alone trying to balance a media presence at 13. Like, it was so terrifying.
I get that everybody has their jobs, obviously, but media is just so, like, disgusting business. Like, I don't know. Like, you're gonna, like, at the time, this girl was probably 13 or whatever, and you're gonna harass her about her two best friends that she just lost, about if she knows what happened. So that's just disgusting. But hey, I get that that's their job, but it's like, come on.
Basically, we have identified the bodies of the two females that were found out yesterday. Abigail J. Williams, 13, of the Delphi area, and Liberty Rose Lynn German, 14, of the Delphi area.
Ugh.
Family has been notified. This is considered a double homicide investigation.
Look how emotional that cop is, too.
I had known that Abby and Libby were active on some kind of sites where you could meet new people, and part of me thought that might have something to do with it, that maybe they had met someone online.
We have nobody in custody at this time.
The next day, police released a picture of a man on the bridge. He appears to be wearing a blue coat.
This is where it comes in.
And boots. They don't say where this picture comes from, but they do say that they are looking for this person and they want to talk to him.
When I first saw that image, I just wanted to solve it immediately. I was flipping through every single person I'd ever seen in my entire life who might walk like that, who might appear like that. And the first thing that I noticed when I saw it was the pockets. That they were filled, that there was something along like the waist area.
I don't see that.
To me, I just immediately was like, that's either a knife set or a gun.
At this point, no one knows where this picture had come from, so speculation was rampant. Was he caught on a trail cam? And if they had that image, what else did they have?
Right.
This picture had actually come from Libby's phone. She had captured that image. Not only that, she had also captured his voice.
So those are the famous words that are associated with this case. Down the hill. Basically that's how, that's kind of just how I got introduced to this case, I guess, is those words popped up on a video and they were like, murder victim caught, potential killer. And this is the video, the famous video that I saw.
His voice.
And for the first time, we hear that this man is the prime suspect in the murders of Abby and Libby.
Finding out that Libby had recorded him, I felt proud of her.
And then in July of 2017, police release a composite sketch. They say that the man they're looking for in this sketch is between 5'6" and 5'10", weighs between 180 and 220 pounds, and has reddish brown hair.
I couldn't think of anyone that I thought looked like that. But then again, I thought of everyone who looked like that. Like, he just looked like every other guy I'd ever seen in this town. I couldn't.
Yeah, he looks like a regular everyday guy.
Anyone specific.
Like, honestly, those are clothes that I'd probably wear, So
it's frustrating.
Who was this person? Was he a trucker passing through? Could he have been a drifter? Was he a serial killer? This is really when the people in town started to pay attention and start to look around.
I've done numerous interviews with police officers, FBI, investigators, and they all, when you get asked, do you have any answers? You just want to have an answer, but I didn't.
And then 2 years into the investigation, a whole new direction.
I think this is it, 2019. I think.
Killer, who may be in this room. We believe you are hiding in plain sight. We likely have interviewed you or someone close to you, and you want to know what we know. And one day, you will.
A couple of new things come out of that presser. They add one word to the audio from Libby's phone.
They also released this much younger sketch saying that he could be as young as 16 at the time of the murders.
I don't know
I
about
thought
that.
to myself, oh my gosh, they have no clue who did it.
Yeah, they look completely
And I was
different.
like, if they don't know, if the age range is from 16 to 40, like, I was like, do they know anything about him? Do they have
And they did.
anything at all?
They did.
I was hopeless. And that to
They
me
actually had a lot of
was
evidence
my worst fear, that
that they just didn't
wouldn't end up arresting
release.
anyone, and they would just become another case.
Despite both of those faces, despite that video, despite that audio, despite the fact that Indiana State Police Superintendent Doug Carter said, this person probably lives here, he's probably a neighbor of yours, no arrests are made for 6 years.
Coming up.
I am proud to report to you that an arrest has been made.
I think everyone's first reaction was, who?
Well, here we are, guys, on Ron Logan's property. This is Deer Creek. The Monon High Bridge is over that way.
So this is in 2020, this video.
And over here is where the bodies were.
This case has been going on for a long time, and a lot of names have come up over those years as potential people who could have been involved in this crime, and none of them have been cleared. Ron Logan was one of the first people that police took an interest in for many reasons. One, yes, the girls' bodies were found on his property. That's going to raise questions. But also, he was out there on TV early doing interviews, giving tours of the crime scene, telling people where he was and when.
Who would have thought they'd let their children out to do something special that day, take a trip down, and then turn out a disaster like this?
Within weeks of the murders, there were 2 search warrants executed at Ron Logan's property. The first one was just looking for guns, and they found 156. The second search was directly...
This man, I mean, I'm all about, you know, freedom to bear arms or whatever, but 156 guns? I wonder why you were a suspect, buddy.
...related to the murders. Ron Logan gave me a copy of the probable cause that was used to get that second search warrant for the search of his property. And in it, the FBI writes that they believe he is responsible for the murders.
There are a couple key pieces of the Ron Logan probable cause affidavit. Perhaps the most compelling part of it is that he constructed an alibi for a crime that had not yet been discovered.
He lied about when he left his house to go buy tropical fish. He had a suspended license. He shouldn't have been driving at all.
Detectives with the Carroll County Sheriff's Office and the Indiana State Police have uncovered an online profile named Anthony Schatz. The fictitious Anthony Schatz profile used images of a known male model and portrayed himself as being extremely wealthy and owning numerous sports cars. The creator of the fictitious profile used this information while communicating with juvenile females to solicit nude images.
We know that Libby was at least friends on social media with the Anthony Schatz profile, and that he at least liked or commented on some of her posts. Kegan Klein from Peru, Indiana, about 40 minutes away, admitted he created that fake profile, and I spoke to him from jail.
Are you aware whether you may have talked to Libby on the 13th?
That's what they said. That's what the police told me.
That you did?
Yeah.
And do you have any recollection of that?
No, not at all.
Did you have anything to do with the murders of Abby or Libby?
Not at all. And I gave up my DNA, a hair follicle test. I've done everything they wanted me to.
I mean, that guy kind of looks like a guy that would create a fake profile.
In October of 2022, surprisingly, we got word that there was an arrest.
What? You know, disbelief? Like...
Yeah, that's why I said, like, they were gathering evidence this whole time, and they didn't want the person to know, obviously, because then they would give up their case. So, and you risk the person fleeing. So, like, this is their grandmother, or Libby's grandmother, and she didn't even know.
Okay, I'm hearing this, but it's a process.
Mm-hmm.
Like the rest of national media, I showed up to watch that press conference to announce the arrest, not knowing what to expect.
Today is not a day to celebrate, but the arrest of Richard M. Allen of Delphi on 2 counts of murder is sure a major step in leading to the conclusion of this long-term and complex investigation.
We expected to be excited and happy and like overjoyed that he's arrested, but now we're dealing with understanding that there's a lot of reopening wounds that's coming with that.
Right, yeah, after 6 years, for sure.
My name's Dan Simitovich. I'm the producer and co-host of Down the Hill, the Delphi Murders podcast. My first reaction...
It's a good podcast.
I think everyone's first reaction was, who? We had no idea who this was.
Right.
Richard Allen, you child murderer! Why did you do it? Shame on you!
Like, at this point in time, there's no, like, indication.
Cleveland, I'm the Carroll County prosecutor. Mr. Allen has had his initial hearing. He's entered a preliminary plea of not guilty, and he is in custody. He's being held currently without bond.
Here comes a guy that has never, ever been announced. He was nobody's radar. It was
Nope.
like...
He was on the police radar, though.
Richard Matthew Allen was 50 years old, had no criminal history, and worked as a farm tech over at the local CVS in Delphi.
I was surprised because he seemed like a real nice guy and everything, waiting on us in the drive-thru and everything.
I had not interacted with him, but everyone knew who he was. I mean, he worked there for so long. And when I found out who it was, I never in a million years thought that it would have been him. Not someone so integral to the community and to the Delphi experience.
Richard Allen has been married to Kathy for 30 years. They have one daughter.
Allen was raised in Mexico, Indiana, about 40 miles from Delphi.
Mexico is a very small town, smaller than Delphi, with a population of about 1,200 people.
His father.
That's where Ricky Allen lived, over there in that yellow house, early on. When I think when he first got married, they moved in there, if I remember right. Very, very nice, very respectable young man. I mean, always has been.
Yeah, my name is David Yoder, and I knew Ricky his entire life.
He is a very loyal dog.
He's quiet, he's very polite, always has been respectful to me. He'll go out of his way to say hi, just to say hello to me. Very friendly, sociable. I really can't speak highly enough about the man. I just can't believe that he did this. I don't believe it for a minute.
People who have talked to who shopped at the CVS and dealt with Richard Allen described him as friendly. In fact, after the murders, Libby's aunt went in there to have some pictures printed for Libby's memorial. She said Richard Allen helped her, and at the time, she thought he was helpful and kind.
Ugh.
I just wanted to ask him, why would you do something like that? Why would you take such two innocent people from this world? Why? What was your motive? What did you want to do? What were your intentions? Did you know all along that that's what you were going to do?
But we still didn't know why he had been arrested, and they said in that press conference that everything about that was still under seal.
Yeah.
This is really important. While I know you are all expecting final details today concerning this arrest, today is not that day.
It's very unusual for what happened in this case to happen, and especially a case of this magnitude, which is why
That's the reason why. When a case is so high profile,
Yeah.
a case that's gone cold for so many years, and there are obviously things that, for some good reason, we as members of the public just shouldn't be privy to.
Prosecutor Nicholas McLeland also said there could be other actors involved in this crime.
Where are those people? Where's that second person? Why haven't we heard anything about it?
Then Sheriff Tobe Lesenby of Carroll County asked the court to move Richard Allen out of the Carroll County Jail, saying they couldn't ensure his safety. So the judge agrees, signs off on that, and sends him to the Department of Corrections. And then the judge immediately steps down from the case.
And what happens is he's moved without a judge who had recused himself, claiming that the bloodlust of the case was just too much for him to handle, and he didn't think that he'd be able to sit on it.
Allen is moved to the Westville Maximum Security Prison. That's pretty unusual because usually suspects are held at the county jail.
With Allen in prison without defense attorneys and now no judge on the case, the Indiana Supreme Court steps in and they appoint Special Judge Francis Gall, who's from Allen County, about 2 hours away.
Coming up, Richard Allen has a message for the judge.
He writes a letter to Judge Gull, throwing himself on the mercy of the court.
Richard Allen is in custody without bond after being charged with the murders of best friends Abigail Williams and Liberty German.
So in November of 2022, we finally hear from Richard Allen. He writes a handwritten letter, gives it to Judge Gull, throwing himself on the mercy of the court, asking for help paying for his defense.
Allen had originally, when he made his first appearance, had told the judge that he was going to try to get private counsel. I don't think realizing how much a case like this would cost in terms of hiring private counsel.
Carroll County is too small to have its own public defenders. So Judge Fran Gull, she appoints 2 private attorneys, Brad Rosie and Andrew Baldwin.
Both of these guys have vast experience. I mean, collectively, they've been trying cases for 50 years. Both very experienced trial lawyers.
His new defense attorneys, Baldwin and Rosie, immediately release a statement saying he is not guilty. He has nothing to hide. He is 100% innocent.
We also learn more about why Richard Allen was arrested in the first place when the probable cause affidavit is released to the public.
That is what the public is going to be basing their initial opinion as to innocence or guilt on.
We learn that the evidence shows that Abby and Libby are dropped off at the trails at 1:49 p.m. And we already knew that Libby's video recording that man on the bridge happened at 2:13, just 24 minutes later.
We learned that the video has one of the girls saying the word gun. We also find out about some physical evidence. An unspent, unfired .40 caliber round is found in between the bodies.
They then brought or had examined by an Indiana State Trooper who had some training with tool markings. He gave a subjective opinion that he thought that the gun that they recovered in Richard Allen's home, pursuant to the search, was a match.
To me, the most damaging piece of evidence that the state of Indiana has against Richard Allen is the unspent round that cycled through his gun, found just 2 feet away from Libby German. He's either the unluckiest guy in the world, or he was there at the scene when those 2 girls were murdered.
Right.
The probable cause reveals at least 4 witnesses. 3 teenage girls and 1 adult woman saw someone generally matching the description of the person in Libby's video between 1:26 p.m. and 2:13 p.m., the time that Abby and Libby were encountering that man on the bridge.
And one of those witnesses is seen on surveillance video arriving around 1:46 p.m. And she says she parked her car and then walked out to the bridge where she saw a man standing on the bridge about 50 feet away. She didn't walk onto the bridge. She turned around and walked back in the direction she came. And when she did that, she passed 2 young girls who were walking towards the bridge. and she believes that was Abby and Libby.
Another witness says that she was driving north of the trails that day, and about 2 hours after the abduction, she saw a man in a blue jacket walking in the opposite direction, quote, muddy and bloody.
Just before Richard Allen was arrested in October of 2022, he met with investigators again after they had resurfaced his name. And he said, yes, I was there. I was wearing a blue jacket. I was wearing a blue pants. I may have been wearing a hat.
One of the other most damaging pieces of evidence came
just
from
admitted.
Richard Allen.
Yeah.
In him admitting to being on the trail that day.
Exactly.
Think about it. He's admitting to being there from 1:30 until 3:30.
Jesus. 2 hours. Yeah.
Fish. So how unlucky is this guy that he admits to being present, and his window encompasses the window of time that investigators believe those beautiful girls were murdered?
Exactly.
About 8 months after his arrest, a slew of documents are released. And that's when we find out that Richard Allen has confessed.
His confessions are going to be a major problem for this defense team. We need to have more than that whenever we have a criminal case. A confession alone is not enough. So the state is mounting this case with other pieces of evidence that corroborate what he's admitting to. We haven't heard the confessions yet. We're just aware that prosecutors have alerted the court to the fact that he has made admissions, made them to his wife by way of a jail phone call, and that they plan to introduce that evidence.
So everything we've been hearing up to this point is the theory of the case from the prosecution, from law enforcement. And then, via filings, we start to hear from the defense. And the details that they lay out are like nothing we could possibly have imagined.
Today, like I said, unexpected, out of left field, 130 pages worth of information in just one of the filings that was released. They are pointing the finger in a very specific direction as to who's responsible.
I think this is where like the cult stuff comes in.
It's some sort of a religious sect / cult that follow Odinism.
Yeah.
And it was a sacrifice. Wow.
When that thing dropped, as a defense attorney, it blew my mind. I had never seen a filing like that.
My name is Mark Pitcavage. I'm a senior research fellow with the Anti-Defamation League Center on Extremism.
Jesus, that's a mouthful.
The argument that Odinism was involved in the murder is largely based on the idea that there were Norse pagan symbols left at the scene of the crime in the form of sticks or branches or blood patterns. And it's not clear to me that any such symbols were actually left at the scene in the first place. Odinism is one of the branches of white supremacy. There are a number of different types of white supremacy, and it's derived from a religion that is, the easiest way to put it is modern Norse paganism. Modern Norse paganism is the revival of some of the old Scandinavian myths and religious beliefs centered around the ancient Norse gods like Odin and Thor and Freya. Most modern Norse pagans are not racist, they're not white supremacists.
Right.
The religion as a whole is innocuous, but this one part of it is not so innocuous. It's much more problematic. So at the Center on Extremism, we try and track extremism in a lot of different ways. One of the things that we started doing in 2008 was to track extremist-related murders, where we created a database to track domestic extremist-related murders. Because those allegations were raised, we have been tracking the progress of the case to see if any of them are ever at some point substantiated with evidence. If, and that's a big if, any of the allegations were actually substantiated, then we would certainly add it to our database at that point.
The defense says this theory of the crime was never fully explored by law enforcement, and that men they've identified as potential suspects were cleared too easily.
And after making those bombshell claims, the defense is off the case.
Oh, they just dropped the defense.
Crime scene photos make their way to YouTube.
pictures like that are just going to incite and enrage people, and they're going to blame the person that's under arrest.
In October of 2023, word gets out that crime scene photos have leaked, apparently from the office of Baldwin. And what it turns out had happened was that someone who was in his office had taken pictures of the evidence and shared them.
Oh, brother.
These things didn't make it out to the public en masse. For number one, for the families, like the nightmare of them getting online one day and opening up a picture of their daughter is like beyond words.
That'd be crazy.
The other thing is you worry about is if they get out, it destroys Rick Allen's opportunity to have a fair trial. It just does.
Right.
Because pictures like that are just going to incite and enrage people, and they are going to blame the person that's under arrest.
Defense attorney Andrew Baldwin says he's essentially the victim of a theft, but the judge is furious, and she accuses the defense team of being incompetent and negligent.
We've had an unexpected turn of events, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Baldwin made an oral motion to withdraw. I granted that oral motion to withdraw, and Mr. Rosie will be submitting a written motion to withdraw, I'm assuming within the next couple of days.
With Baldwin and Rosie off the case, Richard Allen still needs a defense. So Judge Gull appoints 2 attorneys from her home county of Allen County.
She picks Allen County's chief public defender, William Labredo, and Robert Scremin. But that's not the last that we hear of Rosie and Baldwin. They say they were coerced into leaving the case, and they fight to get back on.
So that issue goes to the Indiana Supreme Court, who quickly rule that the original defense team should have never been removed.
79 days after they were appointed,
Jesus.
Labredo and Scremin are off the case.
What the?
Rosie and Baldwin are back.
What?
I was asked to do a job. I did my job. I was then told 2 gentlemen are going to take over. It is what it is. My name's William Labredo. I am now Richard Allen's former lead counsel. I don't think Mr. Allen had anything to do with this.
You're a defense attorney, so that's your job to sort of say your client is innocent.
And rarely do I believe it. But in this particular case, I believe it 100%.
And what convinced you?
Conversations with him, the fact that he lived in this very small community that's not much bigger than a high school. He worked at the CVS in Delphi. The police sketches are hung up in the CVS. The bridge guy picture is in the CVS. And in 5.5 years, no one comes into that store and says that kind of looks like you. I don't know if this has any relevance, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but an arrest was made 27 days before a sheriff election.
How would you characterize the case as you know it against Richard Allen?
That's true.
It's obviously circumstantial. I haven't seen any direct evidence that, other than he admitted that he was on the bridge that day, and we think during the same time frame as the girls were.
There's technically both direct evidence and circumstantial evidence. For example, his confession, that's direct evidence. Witnesses, eyewitnesses, seeing him, that'd be direct evidence.
Eyewitness testimony, inherently unreliable in my opinion. They all saw the same person, and you have that many different descriptions. That's a problem.
Rosie and Baldwin, in a filing, claimed the descriptions attributed to witnesses in the probable cause affidavit are wrong.
So remember the witness who said that she walked out to the bridge and saw a man standing on it, and then she passed what she believes were Abby and Libby as she was walking back to her car? Well, the defense says that the state left out that woman's description of the man she saw. She described a young man, possibly in his 20s, clean-shaven, with a boyish look.
That description is actually what led to the second sketch, which was made in February of 2017,
Interesting.
but not released until April of 2019.
And the witness who saw a man walking on the road, both muddy and bloody, actually just saw a man who was muddy, according to the defense.
Richard Allen's 5'4". So when you're talking about the witness statements, okay, and none of them, that would have been the first descriptive thing that I would have said is that he was really short. Not one of them said that he was a really short guy. And that would have been, like, to me, the first descriptor, you know, and it just didn't happen.
Bradley Rosie and Andrew Baldwin also said there's no electronic evidence linking him to the crime scene or the girls, and that there's no DNA of his at the scene. Is that accurate?
Yes, as far as I can tell, yes. Nothing forensically other than this bullet that they claim that they found, that they shot through a barrel, but there's no way to compare the markings, a bullet, projectile.
This is what makes this case so
fired through a barrel,
like compelling, kind of.
Injection marks, and it was, to my knowledge, about 2 inches underground.
What do you think is the biggest piece of evidence in this case?
There's an alleged confession. That's it to me.
Mm-hmm.
You had not heard of Odinism when it first was floated with regard to this case?
I honestly thought it was hocus pocus. I honestly didn't. I'd never heard of it, and the more I got into it, that's a real thing. It is a real thing, and it's scary. I believe they sacrificed a girl and killed another one.
In addition to pointing the finger at several men who allegedly practice Odinism, the defense says that several of the prison guards in charge of Richard Allen were wearing Odinism patches on their uniform.
I don't think that's.
Describe one of those officers.
I don't think that's allowed.
One of Rosie and Baldwin's filings, Sergeant Jones, who was wearing patches that said "In Odin We Trust" on his Department of Corrections uniform. The judge ordered the warden to make them stop. And then what did you notice?
That Mr. Jones had a tattooed under his right eye. From the best we can tell, it looks a lot like Odin's spear.
Both sets of Richard Allen's defense attorneys have raised issues about what they call harsh conditions behind bars. Rosie and Baldwin also allege that Richard Allen's family was threatened if he didn't confess.
There's no ties to this Odinistic cult whatsoever. He didn't even know that there was Odinist in Delphi. He had never heard of it.
Up next, did Abby and Libby's killer have help?
One of the major things hanging out there right now about this story is the fact that there are likely other people involved in this crime.
Interesting. What do you guys think? You think he did it? I mean, clearly he got convicted, but
Hopefully justice for Abby and Libby will mean some closure for their family members. I always say you never get complete closure in a homicide case because there is a void left in your heart that can never ever be filled. But some bit of closure, some bit of justice and peace, knowing that the right person has been held responsible and can't hurt anyone ever again. All that being said, the state of Indiana has mounted quite a case to prove that Richard Allen is that person.
here. We're here for the evidence, chat. We're here for the evidence.
At the sight of you, oh, so priceless. So this was a song that actually played
The voice.
at her funeral. And just the way that it describes I see you dressed in white, every wrong made right, or it really makes me think of Abby as angelic. I feel connected to her. It just really makes me think that she's an angel by my side rather than the things that she went through and how she died.
There are a lot of things that make me think of her. I got this tattoo of butterflies on my arm, and that was just a huge part of her, she loved butterflies. I think what is important is talking about who they were while they were living, and that's what's most important to me. I really want to make sure that people know that they were good people and that their lives are constantly part of everyone who knew them's lives. True justice would be that there would be no need for justice at all. That it never would have happened, that they never would have been taken from us, that they never would have been treated in that way. For me, there's a piece that really never will reach.
God, such a beautiful place too. Like, it looks like
one of the major things hanging out there right now
a
about
beautiful
this story
place to like
is
live.
the fact that there are likely other people involved in this crime. Prosecutor Nick McClelland said that himself. There could be other actors involved. Former Sheriff Tobe Lesenby saying under oath that he believes it would have taken at least 2 people to commit this crime.
You just have to hope that law enforcement is up to the task, because they're putting all their cards on the table with Rick Allen at this point, you know. But we still have that thing, don't we, sitting there saying we think that there were more involved. So we have to hope that they're continuing to investigate it.
Ron Logan was never charged. Yep. Never charged. Keegan Klein. Oh my God. Yeah. 43 years in prison.
It's easy in all this back and forth and debate about this case. Who did it? Who didn't do it? Who might have done it? It's easy to lose the victims, Abby and Libby. I learned early on and throughout that these girls were the absolute lights in the lives of those who loved them. Abby and Libby were loved. Justice in this case is going to mean different things to different people. I'm not going to presume to define that for those who love them. My definition is a little more traditional. It's arresting and punishing the person or people responsible for this, whoever that may be, and however long that takes.
W. All right. All right, Chad. So that was the case against Richard Allen. Our next video is how were Abby and Libby killed. I'm just gonna skim through this, make sure there's no like. I don't think there's gonna be like any like graphic stuff. I mean, obviously there's probably gonna be graphic, but I'm just making sure like there's no like pictures or anything that could be graphic. All right, I think we're good. All right. How were Abby and Libby killed? Like I said, I haven't watched any of these videos before. This is a first, and I don't know exactly if this is going to get into details on what the police think happened to them. I know from the previous video we just watched that they were talking about, you know, a bullet and a gun, so I'm assuming they got shot. But I haven't heard anything past the first video really that we watched. So let's get into this one and see if it tells us.
I'm Vinny Politan. The subject of my investigation is the Delphi murders, a crime that broke the hearts of a community that turned into an investigation cloaked in secrecy and then turned into a trial with limited public access. And as all this plays out, many are wondering if the truth will be revealed. Here's the story. It was a mystery that broke the hearts of two families, terrified a small community, and touched the world. The murders of two young girls, Abby Williams and Libby German. The case became known as the Delphi Murders. The setting, a small Indiana town of just 3,000 people. From the beginning, investigators suspected it was someone local, which made it even more difficult for everyone living in this small community. It all started on February 13th, 2017, when Libby and Abby went hiking. The two teenagers were good friends and had the day off from school. The weather was unseasonably warm, but when Libby and Abby did not show up when they were supposed to get picked up, their families began to worry and they began to search. Then the next day, the bodies of these two girls were found, both victims of murder. Then over the course of the next 5+ years, there were no answers, no arrests, just a series of disjointed clues, like two sketches that looked nothing alike, a video of a suspected killer, and a short audio recording of his voice. Then finally, 5 years after the murders, an arrest. Richard Allen, a man who worked at the local CVS, was charged. Someone who was not on anyone's radar, but someone who admitted to being at the bridge that day. Allen says he's innocent, and his lawyers have been battling with the judge to try to present evidence of who they say is actually responsible. Cameras have been banned by the judge, and now the public waits to see if the truth will come out inside of a courtroom.
Man, I kind of wish they were allowing at least like court TV cameras or whatever.
A bit unusual. I want to go back in time, though, to the day after the girls were found. And this is a brutal, brutal scene. But here's the information that was revealed by the Indiana State Police who were leading up this investigation.
That's what we've been looking for.
Basically, we have identified the bodies of the two females that were found out yesterday. The bodies have been positively identified as Abigail J. Williams, 13, of the Delphi area, and Liberty Rose Lynn German, 14, of the Delphi area. The two girls were reported missing on Monday, February 13th. The bodies were discovered about 12:15 on the 14th in the woods just east of town here by volunteers that helped in the search of the children after they were reported missing to the Carroll County Sheriff's Department. Family has been notified. This is considered a double homicide investigation. No further information will be released at this time.
And that time, again, is 2017. And it became a murder mystery for 5 years. It wasn't solved. But the other part of it was the investigation, the evidence, everything was kept secret, was kept private, was kept away from the public. And there's reasons why investigators do that, but there's also reasons why some things do get revealed at a certain point. Then they arrest Richard Allen, and still, we know very, very little. And then we find out this, which is 6 years after the murders. We finally get a little more information from the state court documents that were filed in June of 2023. Autopsies of the girls ruled their deaths as homicides, and their wounds were caused by a sharp object.
Sorry.
That was it. That was it. Like I said, unlike most cases that we cover here on Court TV around the nation, in all states, we're in Indiana for this one. So this secrecy, this lack of transparency and information brings me to our first question, which is extremely important in a murder case, which is how were Abby and Libby murdered? What are the details of what happened to these two young, innocent girls? Joining me, Court TV senior producer Barbara McDonald and retired medical examiner and forensic pathologist Dr. Michelle Dupree. Thank you both. Barbara, I want to begin here and take a look at what has come out, what we've learned about Abigail Williams. One gaping wound on the neck, approximately 1 inch deep, likely cut right to left. markings on the face consistent with some type of restraint on the lower face underneath the mouth. This is information that, to me, very new, that we're learning and beginning to paint a more precise picture of what happened to Abigail here.
Yeah, we got that information when the forensic pathologist testified, and that's Dr. Roland Kaur. He described the one injury to Abby. Libby had more injuries, but he also described that after these injuries were inflicted, that it would have taken 5 to 10 minutes, perhaps longer, for them to become unconscious and then to pass away. Also on the stand, he talked about a murder weapon. He, for many years in his report, said that he didn't know what sort of weapon was used, just that it was a sharp object. But he testified in court that he now believes, in the last couple of months, he's come to believe that it might have been a box cutter that was used. And he said he figured that out because of some markings on Libby's neck that looked like they were caused by a serrated blade, and that he was working in his own shop at his home one day and saw a box cutter and said, that looks like what could have caused these wounds, or at least the one wound to Libby. On cross-examination, though, he did admit that that was purely speculation on his part, and he doesn't have any hard evidence that that was, in fact, the weapon.
Dr. Dupree, 1 inch deep, cut right to left. What does that tell you?
Well, that tells you that whoever did this was probably right-handed, because that is the way that a typical person would do that. They would cut from right to left.
The markings on the face consistent with some type of restraint on the lower face under the mouth. I'm trying to understand that.
Yeah, it was a very faint marking that he said was more visible in the photographs that he took at autopsy and not as visible on the body. He described it as being below the mouth, so not preventing her from being able to breathe, if that was in fact a restraint that was on her during this attack. But he couldn't explain what caused it other than to refer to it as some sort of a restraint.
So Dr. Dupree, how can someone make that determination?
Well, sometimes it's very difficult, but if there is some kind of bruising or some kind of redness or something like that, it may be if he held her throat or held her chin and then sliced her throat, that could be what caused that. And it would cause a very subtle injury.
Now, looking at what happened to Libby, 3 to 5 wounds on her neck. 2 injuries look like they had a second pass. Blood on hands indicates Libby tried to put pressure on the wounds to stop the bleeding.
Switch over.
And again, as Barbara's reporting, believes a box cutter caused the serrated marks on Libby's leftmost wound. Let's start there, Dr. Dupree, with the box cutter theory. What are your thoughts there?
Well, it's certainly possible. It appears that what he is describing is a very thin blade, perhaps serrated, and there are many, many types of box cutters or utility knives that would have a serrated edge on that. So it's very likely that could be what caused it.
Now, another part is the autopsy, more of the autopsy findings. It's performed on the morning of February 15th, but they can't determine the exact time of death. The girls likely died somewhere around 41 hours before the autopsy. Rape kits were performed, no signs of sexual trauma. And Barbara, again, to me, this is a big part of this, right? Girls may have been alive for 5 to 10 minutes after the infliction of the wounds. Putting these pieces together with everything else that you know about this case, Barbara, what are you taking away from what we learned from the forensic pathologist?
One of the things that I wondered as he talked about that 5 to 10 minute
I guess
window
I'll just stay here.
Where the girls, he described that Abby certainly would have been able to breathe, that she could have been able to cry or speak, and that they could have moved. And we've heard a lot of the defense theory that this scene was staged and that these girls were positioned. And as the forensic pathologist testified, I kind of wondered if during that time the girls perhaps moved themselves into the positions that they were ultimately found in.
Dr. Dupree, 5 to 10 minutes after the wounds, they're surviving. How much suffering, how much pain, how cognizant are they of what is happening in the moment?
Well, they would certainly have a lot of emotions. They would be scared. They would be absolutely terrified. They would be in pain. They would be bleeding basically out. They wouldn't probably be conscious for the whole 5 to 10 minutes because they would pass out from the lack of blood. However, it would be a very painful death.
This is difficult. Barbara, any reaction from the family to all of these new details being revealed?
I wasn't able, they have the media sitting in the front row of the courtroom, so I wasn't able during much of that testimony to look back at the reaction. But throughout these days in court, we have seen a lot of very emotional reactions from these families. You can tell that they're crying during breaks, during testimony, that it is very, very difficult. It's difficult for everyone to listen to many of these details and see these photos of the crime scene and the autopsy. They're very graphic, as you might imagine. And so I think everyone in the courtroom is really struggling with these materials. The judge even at one point commented to the prosecutor that she appreciated their efforts to sanitize the images that were shown to the jury as much as possible. Jurors are also having a very difficult time looking at this material. I do notice that they are looking a lot over in the direction of the victims' families as much of this testimony has played out.
Okay. It is, I mean, it's heartbreaking. Our guests are staying with us. Coming up next, this is, I think, an important question in all of this, with the crime scene and what we're learning. Was this a sex crime?
Steer Creek, the Monon High Bridge is over that way. And over here is where the bodies were.
Sarah Boone is charged with second-degree murder after her boyfriend suffocated inside of a suitcase.
He's in the suitcase still. There are multiple domestic violence incidents.
You two hitting each other.
Sarah.
That's my name. Don't wear it up.
He's telling you, Sarah, I can't breathe.
George Torres locked inside of a suitcase, begging for help.
I thought he was okay.
The Suitcase Murder Trial. Live coverage weekday mornings, 8/7 Central on Court TV.
I'm going to give you guys just a little taste of what the ground is like here. So there's the creek, which Ron says because of drought is very low right now, much lower than it was at the time of the crime. But even to come up here, this is pretty steep, slippery. The ground is soft. There's a lot of leaves down to trees. And it is not an easy walk. And then you could go over to this area where it's flat. This is where they were found.
That's Barbara McDonald on the scene, at the crime scene, on the property where Abby and Libby were found, but also the creek. Very important because evidence is found in the creek, and according to prosecutors, the girls and the killer had to cross that creek to get to where they were. Now, let's talk about the two victims here. Again, young girls, and how they were found, what they were wearing. We begin with Abby. Abigail Williams is found in a sweatshirt, but it was Libby's sweatshirt, not her own sweatshirt. She was wearing Libby's sweatshirt. She's wearing 2 bras. She's wearing Libby's jeans.
What the fuck?
And she's wearing a tank top. Strange, right?
Yeah, that's
her clothes are off, and she's got Libby's clothes on. In the meantime, Libby is found wearing nothing.
Oh
She's
my God.
Abby's wearing Libby's clothes, and Libby is found nude. Strange, more strange facts with all of this. Like, what does that mean? Brings me to my next question. Was this a sex crime? Was this a sex crime? And don't forget what we learned in the autopsy.
God, I hope
There's no
not.
sign of trauma or sexual assault. Still with me, Barbara McDonald and Dr. Michelle Dupree. Barbara, let's talk more about the way the girls were found and where they were found. Because to answer this question about whether or not this is a sex crime, I think that's all very relevant about what is found where.
I hope not.
And the clothes that are missing, I guess, are found in the creek, right?
Yes, about 30 or 40 feet away from where Abby and Libby were found. And they weren't all found in the same exact area. There was 3 different areas in the creek where that clothing was found, maybe 10 feet between each of those groupings. Some of the clothing was completely submerged at the bottom of the creek, and then other clothing was sort of caught up on tree limb debris that was in the creek that made it visible from the surface of the water.
Dr. Michelle Dupree, I'm trying to understand this, what happened here, right? The scene. And from your perspective, listening to some of this evidence, was this a sex crime?
Actually, it sounds like it could be. We know that there was some undressing and redressing, and we often find that when there is an element of sex involved. It doesn't mean that, of course, that there was any sex that took place. He may not have been able to perform. There's all kinds of other things that this could have been. But it sounds like a sex crime to me.
You know, Barbara McDonald, you know, this gets right into motive, the motive area, right? Like, why did this killer, and if it's Richard Allen, why did Richard Allen abduct these 2 girls? What was his motivation behind it? Was it sexual in nature? Have prosecutors alluded to that?
Yes, in his opening statement, prosecutor Nicholas McClelland said that the state believes that Richard Allen abducted these 2 girls and marched them down that hill so that he could, quote, have his way with them, but was interrupted, and then he marched them across the creek where he ultimately killed them.
So, Dr. Dupree, can there be molestation or sexual assault without leaving behind evidence of that?
Well, of course, we always hope that there is evidence left behind, but certainly there can be. He could have even tried sexual acts post-mortem. And that's not out of the realm of possibility. So there should be some evidence. It doesn't necessarily mean that we would find trauma. It just depends on, you know, what he did in the sex act.
So, Barbara, can you remind us of how the girls were when they were found in terms of positioning and such, and how that could potentially illuminate the situation of what motivated this killing?
Yeah, we also do know, Vinny, that sexual assault kits were done at autopsy. We have not heard yet whether any analysis is back on that and what that might reveal, if anything. But the girls were found in this sort of floodplain area of land that was owned by Ron Logan on the north side of Deer Creek. They were abducted from the bridge on the south side of that creek. And marched about a quarter of a mile to where they ended up. Libby, as you mentioned earlier, or rather, Abby was fully clothed in Libby's clothing, which was wet. She also was wearing her Converse sneakers. They were also wet. But when those were taken off of her feet and photographed, the bottom of her feet, there was dirt and debris from the creek and from the ground on her feet. So it certainly indicates that at some point during this encounter, her shoes were off and then put back on. I also noticed you could only see one of her shoes in the photographs that were shown in court. And in that photograph, her shoe appears to be untied with the tongue pulled out of it, as if you were prepping it to be taken off or put back on a foot. The other shoe was sort of under her leg, and I couldn't tell if that one was tied or what condition that one was in. And then Libby was near her. Their feet were closer together than their heads were, but they were still a couple of, maybe 2 feet apart where their feet were. And
We're out of time for
Libby
now. We're out of time for now. I'm Vinny Politan. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues.
And they like cut her off. Man, I know it's TV, but jeez.
I'm Vinny Politan. As we continue our investigation of the Delphi murders, 2 young girls are dead. A small community is changed forever, and some are wondering if the right man has actually been charged.
Yeah.
Here's the story. Teenagers Abby Williams and Libby German were best friends, living in the small rural community of Delphi, Indiana. On February 13th, 2017, the girls had a day off from school, so they decided to go on an outdoor adventure. They were dropped off near the Monon High Bridge, and while on that bridge, Libby recorded a man with her phone, uttering the words, "Down the hill." It was down the hill where Libby and Abby would be murdered. Prosecutors say the man on the bridge is responsible, and that man is Richard Allen. But Allen and his attorneys say prosecutors have it all wrong. They say Allen is innocent, and it was someone else on the bridge that day who took the lives of these 2 innocent girls. What is the truth? And will Abby and Libby get justice? A big part of this story, I mean, a huge part of this story for the 5 for.
Do we just have like a recording of Richard Allen's voice?
For a guy, and there's video of the killer. Think about that for a second, right? There's an actual video of the killer, and they're searching for 5 years for who this man is.
Right.
So I'm going to show you the video, and not only is there video, but there's also an audio recording of him speaking. So we've kind of put the 2 together here, and you can see the video that was released by police and hear the audio that was released as well. That's just a piece of the video. It's longer than that. That's just the piece that they released. They kept the rest of it to themselves to use at trial. So that brings me to my next question, which is, what does the video reveal?
Good question.
They say that's the killer. What does it reveal? Joining me, Court TV senior producer Barbara McDonald has been covering the story since the beginning, and criminal defense attorney Bob Mata inside that courtroom. Both have been inside the courtroom, obviously. Okay, let's talk about the video, Barbara. I want to put this up on the screen. Recorded February 13th, 2017, 2:13 on an iPhone 6S. Libby is heard saying there's no path. The trail ends here. We have to go down there. Then the man, the bridge man, the killer says, guys. Abby says, hi. Man says, down the hill.
Man.
Is it clear that that's what's happening on this video?
It wasn't super clear to everyone. That was the consensus of the media, is that Abby says hi after he says guys. The prosecutor had laid out in their search warrant or probable cause affidavit on Richard Allen that the man, or that Abby rather, says the word gun in that video. No one who was in court as that video played heard the word gun. They thought that it sounded like Abby said hi, but they also played an unenhanced and then the enhanced version. The entire video is 43 seconds long, and I think it's certainly up for debate what exactly the words are that are spoken in that video.
Bob Mott, a 43-second video. What does it reveal?
Well, initially when they showed it and the way that it went down is they showed the unadulterated, unenhanced video first. And my instinct, and unfortunately I can't have my watch in because I have an Apple Watch, so I couldn't time it. But the feeling of it is that I looked to my seat neighbor and I said, was that 43 seconds? Because it didn't seem like 43 seconds. And when I'm initially looking at it the first time, and they only played it one time, I don't see the man behind Abby. I'm like, where was the guy? And the person next to me is like, well, I think I saw the guy. So then when they put the next witness on, who was the witness that did the enhancement, they played it again. So we got to see it a second time, and I was diligently looking for the guy. So I see the guy, and he's way back there, okay? And he's clearly still on the bridge. All right, now you've heard enough about this bridge, Vinny. At this point, there is no walking across this bridge without looking down to see where you're going. It is not possible. You will fall to your death.
Right. Bob, we're taking a look at it right now so people understand the Monon High Bridge. This is a bridge I would never go over, but people do, and they did. So explain this to me one more time. The proximity of the man to the girls, and if the girls are recording him. I mean, we've seen this one zoom shot. It looks like he's got a gate to it. I don't know if that's just because the video's looped. So compare what we're looking at now, which is like a zoom in, and it's kind of blurry, right? Of this man versus what was shown and what the whole video actually looks like.
So it's from Libby's POV. Okay, so the first shot we see is Abby probably about, what would you say, Barbara, 10 yards away from Libby, where she's filming, and she's still on the bridge. I'd say 25 to maybe 30 yards beyond her is the guy. So then the focus goes to the ground, and you hear Libby talking. She's saying, oh, here's some gravel. And then she flashes back up momentarily. You see Abby for just a second, who looks like she's kind of jogging because she's reached the end of the bridge. All right, so she's off the bridge. She's still on the tracks, but she's off the bridge. And then she goes back down to the ground, Libby does, with her filming, and says something to the effect that there's no path. This is where we can go down, or there's no path to go down. Maybe Barbara can remember exactly what she says. And then you hear at the very, very
interesting
end, Vinny, the very last maybe 2 seconds is where you hear what sounds like a male voice, and then that's it. It's over.
And
so that's the whole thing.
When do you see it? Like this video I've been looking at for years, it wasn't so clear. So there might only be this one little clip of him.
Yeah, I think what Bob was indicating, as Libby is holding the phone, she's motioning with that hand. And so she pulls the hand down and you see the ground, and then she pulls her hand back up as she's talking and motioning. And that's when you get to see the man and Abby a little bit more. But it's out of the 43 seconds, he's not in frame for very many of those seconds. And some of the seconds that he would possibly be visible, Abby is between him and Libby, and so blocking the view of the man. So it's really, there's not a lot of information in that video that's particularly helpful about what exactly happened.
Right. We get to see his clothing, though, right? We get to see his clothing, but for the jury that's looking at this, they don't get what we have, right? Which is the looped close-up image of this person. They get the whole thing.
Right. They get to see it once.
And that's it, Bob? Once? They see it once and that's it?
Once. And then when the reconstruction guy or the enhancement guy came on, they played it a second time. So that's all we saw it. And what I'm suggesting is, and I'm curious as to what Barb's opinion is on this, and I
That's
think
interesting, actually.
Outside of court, how does he make up that distance in that short period of time under the conditions that I talked about initially, which is he has to traverse that bridge.
Wait
to
a
close
minute.
That
Wait,
gap.
are you saying that it may not be the bridge man whose voice that is?
You cannot see his mouth move.
Wow. So is it possible someone that's on the other side of that bridge? And what's on the other side of the bridge? Who would be there? Who would have access to that?
Private property. That's where the private property begins. There are some paths.
Whose private property is that?
It's the Weber property, and I believe at the time it was owned by his parents, but Brad Weber was living there. I believe now it is his property, but it is private property on the south end of that bridge.
So there might be another guy.
So,
this is all interesting.
Video that we've been waiting for you, like what was released is much clearer than what was shown. Is that make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, that is not what the video looks like. That image, that has been enhanced, and they've zoomed in on it. They've taken those frames of the video and they've enhanced it. So they got as close up, they got it as unblurry as they could get it. And that's what we've been seeing for all these years. It's not what the video looks like at all. I mean, that guy is off in the distance.
And what you're saying
people have
is,
asked, why isn't there more video? And
Right.
there's no more of him to show. That's it.
and again, the distance and the time significant here, because from what you saw, Bob, when you see the whole video, which again has not been made public, the amount of time that it might take for the bridge guy to be close enough to be heard on
That's interesting. I think they need to release the whole thing.
may or may not make sense to you, Bob. Is that what you're saying?
It doesn't. I just don't see. And again,
I want to see
right? Because you're
full
looking
video.
at him, and he's definitely in the background. But like, Barb, what do you think? Like, what would you estimate how far when we first see him? Because I'm telling you, I did not see him at all the first time that they played the video. The second time, I was diligently only looking.
But when that video begins, he is definitely some distance behind Abby. She seems to be sort of trying to hurry. She's
That's
looking
interesting.
down, trying to hurry off of the bridge to get to where Libby is, who's already off the bridge on that south side. But by the time the video is about to end, he definitely seems to have made up that distance. Either he's very familiar with that bridge and had no problem speeding up.
I don't know about that. Even
I suppose.
So even like a bridge that you're familiar with, or like train tracks or anything, or even like remote places in the woods, you still have to like look down. I mean, see how high that bridge was? Like, you have to look down and navigate that, or else you're dead, like the guy said.
You could argue that there's another voice from somewhere else, because you don't see that man speaking those words on that video.
This is so different than what I expected. So different than what I expected. Our guests are staying with us. Still to come. Did eyewitnesses see Richard Allen?
This video is more interesting to me, I think, right now.
One of the most successful true crime TV shows ever.
This is crazy.
Now has a new home on America's original true crime obsession. 48 Hours on Court TV. Coming up
Okay,
next.
like, if you don't see that guy talking, then that's not the guy, right?
You're not prepared to take responsibility for any of your crimes?
Interview with a Killer, a Court TV original series. Sunday, 8/7 Central, only on Court TV.
Today is not a day to celebrate, but the arrest of Richard M. Allen of Delphi on 2 counts of murder is sure a major step in leading to the conclusion of this long-term and complex.
This is kind of making me think that he didn't do it now.
Continue a very methodical and committed approach to ensure that if any other
But
person
we'll wait to see what else they got.
in these murders in any way, that person or persons will be held accountable.
That's after the arrest of Richard Allen. And by the way, some people believe there are potentially others involved, and there are some that believe Richard Allen's not involved. And then, of course, prosecutors believe he acted alone.
Mm-hmm.
So, there were other people there that day. Other people who saw things, which brings me to my next question, which is about the eyewitnesses. Did eyewitnesses see Richard Allen? You know that moment in a courtroom, right? Do you see the person you saw walking across the bridge in court today? Yes, I see them right there, sitting at counsel table, wearing the what is this, purple shirt. Still with me. Barbara McDonald and Bob Mata. Let's go through some of these witnesses. First one, this is a witness who saw someone before the murders. This is Brianne Wilbur, who was, I believe, 16 at the time, saw the bridge guy at the trails walking with a purpose before Abby and Libby arrived. A man dressed in layers caught her attention because it was a warmer day. Man gave her weird vibes. Man was wearing a blue or black jacket. That's what we see there. Blue pants. That's what we see there. He was taller. Brianne was the height of his upper arm. Told law enforcement in 2020 the man she saw was in his 20s. Well, she's 16. I don't know how well she knows ages, but says he was in his 20s. Barbara McDonald, how does that match up?
Well, so far, nobody's been able to say that the person they saw was Richard Allen. And the question that you just asked, Vinny, about do you see the man in court today, that's not been asked of these witnesses. Another teen witness who was with Brianne Wilbur that day, Rayleigh Voorhees, she testified that the man she saw was taller than she is, and she's 5'7". And the defense attorney, Jennifer Auger, said, so perhaps 5'10"? And she said, yes.
Well, how tall is Richard Allen?
Is about 5'4" to 5'5".
Bob Mata, what are your thoughts here? We'll put up another one of the witnesses here, which is Betsy Blair. Again, this is before the murder. Saw a man on the bridge. He looked like he was expecting someone or something. Said the man she saw was the man in the bridge guy image.
Of course,
right
they're all saying
That's
that.
the guy. Said he was in his 20s to his
50s. Jesus.
Had brown poofy hair, and said the man looked young. I'm wondering if she's the one that gave the description of the sketch that looked like Justin Timberlake.
Yes, she is.
Yeah, okay.
He is.
There you go. Bob Mata, I mean, you've tried a lot of cases.
20s to 50s? That's a big time. I mean, that's a big age gap.
This is the person I saw. And the sketch on the right is the Timberlake one I was talking about. What are your thoughts, Bob, about Brianne Wilbur and Betsy Blair?
It's exactly like you said. Eyewitness testimony is typically the most unreliable testimony you can get, because every person, when they're in a moment like that, doesn't necessarily know, unless they're seeing a crime being perpetrated at the time, doesn't know they have to commit anything to memory.
Right.
So you're just kind of looking at somebody. You might be like, hey, it looks a little off. But if you don't know that you need to remember what you're seeing, you're going to forget details.
Yeah, that's true.
When Rayleigh Voorhees is testifying, she remembers the guy wearing all black. Black black sweatshirt or a black jacket, black jeans, black boots. You know, so like everybody's memory of this guy is completely different than the other ones. Now, Betsy Blair she looks to be in her late 40s, somewhere around in that area. And she was obviously older than the girls that were all still in high school, and even younger out of that group of four with Rayleigh and Brianne, who were together with two of Rayleigh's sisters. They were all out there. And so we heard two of their witness accounts, and they were both very different. Even to the extent where Rayleigh says that they see him, in my estimation, of my count, Barbara, it was 45 minutes later than what Brianne said, because she took the picture, which she did have a timestamp, which was put on Snap. And we know that that picture was taken about, I think it was 1:39, I think she said. It might have been 1:29 p.m. And where Rayleigh had them seeing him like after, like at 2:15, like right before they were getting to the Freedom Bridge. So there's a group that's together, but their time is way off as to when they saw them. So, I mean, it's problematic. It's problematic as to when they saw him.
And they're not saying that's the guy. Like in court, the guy sitting right there,
No in-court IDs.
Nothing. One more witness I need to get to before we run out of time, Barbara. I'm so sorry. Sarah Carbaugh saw a man walking on 300N covered in mud and blood. Mud all over, blood spatter on the lower pants only. Man's demeanor was sketchy. His head was down, hands in his pockets. Tells police what she saw 3 weeks later. That's a problem. The other stuff sounds pretty good. Barbara, your thoughts about Sarah's testimony?
This was a witness I really wished that we had cameras in court for, because it would be interesting for the public to be able to see her testimony. She came off as very rehearsed, not necessarily rehearsed by the prosecution, but rehearsed perhaps on her own. She got very argumentative with the defense. They pointed out that she was interviewed 3 times by police. She never mentioned the blood in the first 2 interviews. She also didn't even call police until 3 weeks after she saw the man. She says she saw the man covered in mud and blood, goes home, learns Abby and Libby are missing, and then waits 3 weeks to call police because she was feeling anxiety and panicky about what she had seen.
I mean, you can. I mean, that's true.
On cross-examination, a lot of her testimony really fell apart. She only mentioned the blood in the 3rd interview, but she didn't even mention the mud in that interview. She tried to say that perhaps the police officer didn't write down what she said, or that might have been part of the testimony or part of the recordings that were lost in the early days of the investigation. I think at the end, she perhaps wasn't as credible as the state had hoped she would be.
Yeah,
and
probably.
It's important seeing a man walking down 300N, which could be the killer, and if it's Richard Allen, walking back to his car. Big thank you, Barbara McDonald, Bob Motta. We got a lot to do on this story, and we'll continue the coverage, obviously. Abby and Libby were so brave. Getting that video, even if it's just that split second of the killer, so important. They did not.
They really are. No.
They deserve justice. And in our system, justice equals the truth, whatever it is and wherever it leads. So let's hope, despite their lack of transparency, that the truth of what happened to Abby and Libby is revealed in Indiana. Those girls deserve it.
Yeah, they do.
I'm Vinny Politan. We'll keep digging for answers.
All right. Video number 3. Richard Allen, guilty or not? Let's find out.
For more than 5 years, it was a mystery, an unsolved case with many leads, suspicious characters, and so many rumors. Investigators released very limited information, but journalists, podcasters, and true crime followers all speculated on what happened to best friends Abby Williams and Libby German, two teenage girls living in the small rural community of Delphi, Indiana, a town with under 3,000 residents. On February 13th, 2017, the girls had a day off from school and they decided to go on an outdoor adventure. They were dropped off near the Monon High Bridge, and that's where their bodies were found the next day. More than 5 years later, Richard Allen was arrested for the murders, but he is claiming his innocence, and the defense has their own theory of the case. A group of white nationalists who practice the ancient Nordic religion of Odinism murdered the girls in a ritualistic killing. They also claim that the reach of these local Odinists goes all the way to the prison where he was being held. But at his trial, Richard Allen was prohibited from using any evidence connected to Odinism. And now, all the evidence is in. All the arguments have been made. And it's time to hear from the jury. And we are live from Indiana with all the latest in the Delphi Murders trial.
Nice.
I'm Vinny Politan. Thank you so much for joining us tonight here on Closing Arguments. Believe it or not, we're getting to the end of the Delphi Murders trial out in Indiana. As you know, cameras have been banned by the judge, so we don't get to see or
I wish
hear
they
any
weren't.
evidence, but we are covering it for you here on this program each and every night with our great in-depth coverage and insiders who are inside that courtroom. You know, when you think about this case, you think about this story, it's an incredibly tragic loss because you're talking about two young girls, best friends, living their best innocent lives in a small town in Indiana. Everything should be great. Everything should be great. You know, on that day, they were off from school and, you know, they decided to go do something together. Rather than sit around, play video games or goof around on social media or do anything like that, they were going outside. And they were actually going to walk over this really dangerous bridge, the Monon
Yeah, look
High
at that bridge, man. Look at that bridge. People are crazy that walk over that. But
sort of a rite of passage. I think all the folks from that area at one
Yeah.
point or another try to see if they could walk over that bridge. You're looking at it right here. I mean, no rails on the side. It's wood slats, a little rickety, but they did it. Like they made it over the bridge, and then there were some trails near the woods that you could walk around. And there were other people out that day because it was a little bit warm for February in Indiana. It was like in the 50s, which is actually a really nice day in the dead of winter. And they were having an innocent, good time, but they made it over the dangerous bridge. And the question is, the man they ran into that day, was he more dangerous than the bridge? And prosecutors say it's this man, Richard Allen. I mean, they absolutely ran into somebody on that bridge, referred to as the bridge guy. Prosecutors say Richard Allen is the bridge guy. But was Richard Allen, who admits that he was there that day, was he more dangerous than the bridge? Or has he been put out as the scapegoat in all of this? That's what this trial is about.
I mean,
and
he
we're waiting to find out.
kind of looks like that guy in the bridge, but
What are they going to say about
so he definitely looks like the guy in the bridge, in my opinion. That being said, based off of the last video we watched, was that bridge guy even involved in these murders? You know, it could have been somebody already on the other side. You know, and that's just judging by the last video. Because they said the famous bridger guy photo was only the back, you know, split second like that. So that being said, like if that's true, which I mean they got no reason to lie, then I don't know if that bridge guy that was walking across the bridge, is part of, is guilty of the crimes. But that could be Richard Allen. I don't know. It looks like him. But it's a matter of, did that person commit those crimes? We don't know. I mean, we have theories, and clearly, the convictions out and everything, that they found him guilty, but did he really do it? We don't know. I mean, I guess that's up to us to decide, but let's just see what this video is all about and see if maybe we can choose if he's guilty or not.
About this.
In our own opinions, of course.
The jury has the case. So let's get to our insiders. Joining me tonight, Court TV senior producer Barbara McDonald and criminal defense attorney, host of the Defense Diaries
This
podcast,
guy's good.
Bob Mata, both in Indiana,
Bob Mata.
both on this story for a long, long time, and both inside the courtroom for this trial to see and hear the evidence that we can't see and hear. Literally, our eyes and ears in the courtroom. Thank you both for being here. All right, Barbara, let's begin. What is the latest from deliberations, because the jury has the case now?
They do have the case, and they deliberated about 2 hours this afternoon.
Just so you guys know, time frame wise, this is I think this video was posted 2 or 3 days ago. So the live verdict one was posted yesterday, and that's the one we're gonna watch next.
And then called it a day. They are sequestered, so they didn't get to go home. They went back to their hotel, about a half an hour probably away from the courthouse. They'll begin again tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. They were told to begin their deliberations with selecting a 4-person. We imagine that they did that. And then they discussed the case for 2 hours and said, all right, that's enough for today. We'll come back tomorrow. The judge said that they can go until 4 p.m. each day unless they request to go longer. They chose to go shorter today, Vinny.
And are they sequestered?
They are fully sequestered, so they don't have access to the internet. They are allowed to have their phones or laptops in the evening with bailiff supervision while they check in with their family and loved ones and check work emails, that sort of thing, but they are not allowed to keep those devices. They have no radios, no televisions, no internet. They can't talk about the case with anybody else, and they cannot deliberate when they're at the hotel. They can only deliberate at the courthouse.
Okay.
Bill, this is very unusual. Usually you have a jury that is sequestered. The deliberations and the days go longer, and they keep them. I know they've been working Saturdays. So, Barbara, how long was this trial?
It was 17 days of testimony, 18 days, including today with closing arguments.
Okay, 17 days of testimony. I have a little theorem, Bob Mata, for what an average deliberation time is. And I base it on weeks or days here. 17 days of testimony. That's like three weeks, 3 and change. I'm thinking until we get past 17 hours of deliberations, we don't have a long deliberation in a case like this. So they did 2 today. If they don't get a verdict tomorrow, they don't get a verdict Monday, I think around Tuesday things start getting on the longer side. But what are your thoughts as you sit here tonight,
Monday.
having eyeballed this jury, and seeing that, hey, a sequestered jury decided to go home early today?
Yeah, that took me by surprise, because one of the things that lawyers that actually do trial work hate most is when a jury goes in on a Friday, in terms of, especially if they heard closings and then they get the instructions and then they end up going in at like 1 o'clock on a Friday. That's the dreaded time to have them start, because if it's been a long trial, you always have that fear that they're going to get a compromised verdict because they're done.
All
They're
seats
over it.
look
They want to get out
uncomfortable.
there. They don't want to have to either come back or deliberate on a weekend. So I was excited that this thing was getting done on a Thursday. I was like, well, they're only going to have like four hours to really kind of get into it. But I mean, it's a good start. So when they called and said, look, we're good for the day, like obviously I'm thinking, okay, it's one of two things. It's one, either they've come to an agreement very quickly and they're like, you know what, let's sleep on it. We're all in agreement. Let's make sure, let's sleep on it. Plus, we don't want to make it look like we didn't really deliberate. So, we'll sleep on it and then we'll come back. And if they come back pretty quickly tomorrow, we'll know that that's the case, that they actually were already in agreement in what was going on. Or it may have gotten heated. And they're like, you know what? Let's take a break. Let's take a breath. Let's come back tomorrow.
Hungry.
So.
Or hungry. I don't know if they feed them there, if they're going to feed them dinner at the courthouse.
Okay.
They feed them. All right. Maybe they want to keep them. I don't know. This judge, no cameras. Maybe it's no food. Maybe it's just bread and water for the jury. I don't know. All right. Let's talk about the closing arguments. Start with you, Barbara. What about the state's closing argument today?
The state took about an hour for their first part of their closing argument and then only 7 minutes for their rebuttal closing argument. That's Nicholas McClelland right there from the press conference announcing Richard Allen's arrest. And he delivered that closing argument. He talked about the 3 facets of the case for him: the bridge guy, the bullet, and the brutal murder, and says that all of the witnesses that were at the trails that day testified that they saw the guy in Libby's video, that he feels confident that all of that evidence proves that Richard Allen is in fact Bridge Guy and that Bridge Guy committed these murders.
Let me interrupt you for 1 second, Barbara. I hate to do this, but I just want to make it clear because we're not getting to see or hear any of this. Was there any witness who saw Bridge Guy who in the courtroom pointed at Richard Allen and said, yeah, that's the Bridge Guy right there?
No, we heard that from last video. Nobody said that.
The witnesses who did that were law enforcement people who talked about talking to Richard Allen, like Dan Doolin, the DNR guy who first took that tip from him back in 2017. He identified Richard Allen in the courtroom.
Of course, keep in mind this was like 5 years ago, 5, 6 years ago. So
Blair or Sarah Carbaugh, who
I mean, I don't know about any of you guys, but I don't even remember what I had for breakfast this morning.
None of them were asked.
Never mind who I saw 5 years ago.
Saw that day in the courtroom, and so none of them pointed him out.
So how do they say they proved that Richard Allen is the Bridge Guy? Was it his own statement saying I walked across the bridge that day?
Yeah, and that basically his statements sort of line up with what the witnesses say, that he said he saw several teen girls, and there were 3 teen girls who saw Bridge Guy, that when he got out to the bridge, that he walked out onto the first platform and stood there looking at the fish in the creek below, and that he maybe saw somebody when he was on that platform. That lines up with Betsy Blair, who says she walked to the bridge, saw a Bridge Guy on the platform, but she also described him as being younger, youthful in appearance, with poofy hair. So it's up to the jury whether or not they believe that the man that Betsy Blair saw was in fact Richard Allen. The state seems confident, but will the jury be confident?
Of course the state seems confident though, because like...
How do they connect that Bridge Guy is the one who committed...
That's all they've been looking at.
That was something they just said, that there was nobody else there, that the video shows one man and that they believe Richard Allen did this acting alone. The defense, of course, has pointed out throughout this trial that multiple people in law enforcement thought there could be multiple.
And of course, we learned from last video that the video that they are showing to the public, that guy walking across the bridge, that's a enhanced, zoomed in, according to last video, very zoomed in, brief clip, like maybe there's the full clip is like 43 seconds, and this was like as quick as like having your phone and going across the screen, or going across, like that's how quick it was. Like you're just going across to look at something else. So I don't know, maybe 2 seconds, second. And according to the last video we watched with these 2 people, they said that the guy on the bridge, the guy in the video that's released to the public, was so far away from them that it would be like impossible for him to catch up. So, in their opinion, so if that is Richard Allen, is that even the guy that committed these murders? We don't know. Like I stated before, so just strange.
That the scene would have taken one person, just too much time, and so therefore it makes sense that more people were involved. The former sheriff Tobe Lesenby even testified that that was his belief.
Wow. All right, Bob Mata, watching the state's closing argument and listening to it, what are your thoughts about because Richard Allen needs to be bridge guy needs to be the murderer. Did they close the gaps on all of that?
It's hard to know. I mean, there was nothing novel about the closing. I mean, it was essentially the same thing that he said in the opening. Like, he didn't really focus on the evidence all that much in terms of, I mean, we have the round. It's unequivocal in the mind of the state that is the nexus between Allen and that crime scene, right? So,
the unspent round that cycled through his gun but wasn't fired, based upon their experts' analysis, that the markings on that are the same as the markings on a round that was fired from the gun.
Correct. And I mean, he talked about it a bit, but, considering that was their strongest piece of evidence, I found it, he kind of just glazed over it. But part of that is due to the fact that Oberg, the expert who testified, really didn't give an explanation to the jury as to why it was a sufficient agreement, which is
turn his gain down on his mic or something.
Used in that field for a match. All right, they're not allowed to say a match. They have to say there was sufficient agreement. So, there's this concept that you have to show your work. But in terms of, he really tried to build his argument around the timeline, and that, look, we know Allen was out here. We know these people saw him out here. He has to be a bridge guy because no one else saw another guy out there.
Wow.
It's process of elimination. He has to be the guy because no other witness talked about any other guy. So I mean, and that was basically it.
Process of elimination, right? It had to be him. There's nobody else there. That's what they're saying. Nobody else there. All right.
Unless there's somebody
Barbara,
hidden.
Let's talk about the defense closing argument. How was that?
The defense talked about the evidence and said that the state did not give you the full story about what happened out there, and that they had to fill in the gaps by calling other witnesses who were on the trails that day, who didn't see a man, but also didn't hear any screams or any commotion coming from the crime scene. We heard from searchers who were at the crime scene that you could hear people on the bridge. So they sort of made the analogy that if people from the crime scene could hear the bridge, people on the bridge should have been able to hear the crime scene. Nobody heard anything, even though there were multiple people who even walked across the bridge during the time the state believes these murders happened. And they also talked about Richard Allen's treatment behind bars and those false confessions, as they called them, and said that his treatment was essentially torture. They Bradley Rosie showed some images of medieval torture devices, and then showed a slideshow of images of Richard Allen behind bars. Just really difficult images to see, him lying naked on the floor of his cell. Him covered with a hood over his head, other images of him strapped down, and then finally put up an image of a python wrapped around its prey and said, in this story, that python is the state.
Interesting. So they're playing, Bob, they're playing Richard Allen as a victim here. But we have, you can say emotions have nothing to do with verdicts.
Interesting.
Shouldn't have anything to do with verdicts. But it's a reality. Everyone's a human being. Every juror, everyone in that courtroom. And you've got two innocent young girls who were brutally killed, and it was unconscionable what happened to these two girls. Their families are I presume, very obvious in the courtroom. And I've got to think that a jury's going to want justice for the family. They won't want to let the family down. That if there's the evidence is there, they're going to try to get them some sense of justice. So balance that, Bob, versus the defense's attempt to garner sympathy for Richard Allen.
Yeah, and it's a dangerous gambit. And like during the course of the trial, you know, there was a question that was posed wherein they were saying, are you trying to ask, McClellan asked, and I can't remember what witness is, he says, are you trying to say that Richard Allen is the victim? And I think it may have been Westcott, who was their forensic psychologist that they had on. And she said, no, you know, because it's exactly what you're saying. I mean, look, if it turned out that Richard Allen is not the culprit, then certainly he's been victimized, you know, in a very different way than obviously the girls, right? So, but as the defense, I think that we were really trying to paint the picture as the defense was like, look, we cannot take American citizens, no matter what we think that they might have done, and we cannot treat them like this. This is not what we signed up for as a country. This is not who we are.
Yeah.
And you know, he, like, at the end of it, he said, look, like, this is not the time to take a step back. And he's talking to the jury. He says, this is the time for you to step in the ring. This is the time for you to say no to the government. We're not going to allow you to treat us citizens like this, no matter what you think that we did. We did, you know, constitutionally, we were owed a fair trial and due process under the law. You're not allowed to torture us to extract confessions. So it was, I mean, it was effective, but that wasn't all of it. That was probably the last 5 minutes was really kind of focused on that. The rest of it was picking apart the state's case. And really the focus mostly was on what the state didn't show you, you being the jurors. Why didn't they show you this? Why did we have to put it on in our case in chief? Or why did we have to pull it out of their witnesses on cross-examination? These facts. That's what you have to ask yourself. Why? Why were they hiding this information? And that was like a bulk of the closing. It was effective. It was effective. But at the end of the day, who knows what a jury's going to do, Vinny?
No,
you just don't know.
I never know what a jury's going to do. Whether
Right.
I watch them every day or don't watch them every day, you don't know what the dynamic is. But I do know that there is a sense for jurors that they want to find justice for the victim's family and for the victims when the victims are like this, two innocent young girls brutally murdered who should be alive, should be enjoying their lives. Their family should be watching them grow up. And sometimes that's difficult to overcome if there is arguably enough evidence to convict. So that'll be fascinating to see them, how they balance that and how they handle that. Let me ask you, Barbara, about the families in the courtroom. What did you notice?
The families were there in full force today, both for the victims, Abby and Libby, as well as Richard Allen's family were there all in full force. I noticed that prior to the day beginning, most people had gathered in the courtroom about 30 to 45 minutes before court actually began this morning. And at one point I heard sobbing and I looked over and it was Abby's mother who was just crying uncontrollably.
Yeah.
She was being comforted by her own mother, as well as some of the members of Libby's family. You could just feel the emotion. They have waited almost 8 years for justice. They believe that Richard Allen is the guy. They have confidence in this investigation. And I think they're ready for this to be over. Not that it necessarily brings closure for them, but they can move on to the next phase of the grieving process without having the question of who did it, where are they, and when are they going to be brought to justice, provided there is a guilty verdict here.
That's so true. They never get closure.
Which obviously
Never
there
get
was,
closure,
but
you get a sense of justice, which is the only thing you can have, and you get to like turn the page, go to the next chapter of whatever's going on, but you never, ever, ever forget. Barbara McDonald, Bob Motta, I know will be speaking on Friday, which is oftentimes a verdict day. So Thank you so much for your great reporting, great insight and analysis of what's happening there. Okay, when we come back, we'll bring in our think tank. We'll dive into some of the evidence and some of the issues in the Delphi murder case.
That's what I want to see.
Tank. Plus, coming up next.
That's what I want to see, chat. The evidence.
Tonight on Vinny Politan Investigates, Maya Miliete disappeared on January 7th, 2021. Her body has never been found, but her husband has been charged with her murder. While we wait for the trial, everyone is still looking for an answer to the most important question. Where is Maya?
Court TV's Vinny Politan with the latest and breaking true crime stories.
Now, let's look at the other side of all of that.
Vinny Politan Investigates.
This guy's really good, but Vinny Politan.
Court TV.
What happened that night?
Killed my wife. I don't remember none of that.
If you were me, would you believe you?
Interview with a Killer. Sunday, 8/7 Central. Only on Court TV.
Let's never forget this case went unsolved for 5 years, the Delphi murders. Then the arrest of Richard Allen took place, and prosecutors said they wrapped it all up. He did it by himself. There was no one else involved. Richard Allen says he's innocent, pointing the finger in other directions.
Yeah.
But during the course of this trial, more evidence has come out. We've had testimony from witnesses, and now we have a much better timeline of what witnesses say they saw and where Richard Allen was and where Abby and Libby were. So I want to go through that right now. This is sort of a timeline map that we've put together to try to understand what was going on that day.
All right, let's
and we begin at 1:26 p.m. Bree Wilbur is sitting on a bench near Mears Gate entrance to the trails when she sees Bridge Guy. Okay, so she sees Bridge Guy. Bridge Guy, that's the video we've been seeing all the time. There he is. 1:43 is when Libby's sister Kelsey drops Abby and Libby off across from Mears Farm. So now they're dropped off by Mears Farm, and, you know, before that, you see the Bridge Guy near the entrance of the trails. 2 o'clock, another witness. Her name is Betsy Blair. She sees Bridge Guy on the first platform of the Monon High Bridge.
Okay.
And said that he seemed to be looking for someone. Okay, so 2 o'clock, there he is, first platform of the Monon High Bridge. And again, when they identify this guy, it's the guy from the video. It's the guy from the video that the witnesses are identifying. 2 o'clock, Betsy Blair is walking away from the Monon High Bridge as she passes Abby and Libby, who are walking towards the bridge, which is interesting, right? So Betsy Blair's walking in the opposite direction, first sees the bridge.
So that's interesting for, I mean, he's probably gonna say this, but it's interesting for a number of things. One, like he was, I think, about to say, she saw the guy first on the bridge looking at fish, or on the platform anyway, which, come here, I would assume would be like one of these things. So she saw him first. Betsy Blair saw him first. He was on the platform. Then she walks backwards. So she was here. Then she walks this way. And then she sees Libby and Abby, like right here. Whatever. You know, in this area. So that they weren't even at the bridge yet when she saw them. That's, I mean, that's interesting that this guy, now, could they have passed him on the platform? Sure. But maybe they'll get into that.
Bridge Guy then sees Abby and Libby, which tells me that Abby and Libby are going to be walking past the Bridge Guy. Because at 2:13, the Bridge Guy is captured on video on Libby's phone in the background, as if they've walked past him. So at that point, 213, Libby and Abby have gone past this bridge guy. So the bridge guy is going to now, standing there, whatever he's looking for, sees two young girls by themselves. 2:32 is when Libby's phone stops moving, and prosecutors made a big deal about this. They believe this is the time that the murders are taking place. We get to another important time and another important witness. 3:56, Sarah Carbaugh is driving past the Hoosier Harvest store on CR 300 North when she sees a muddy, bloody man walking west on the north side of 300 North, away from the Monon High Bridge. So I think through this timeline and the map, you can kind of see the movements of everyone connected to what happened here. And you see the connection, and you see the way prosecutors are putting the bridge guy right next to and in the vicinity of Abby and Libby based upon this eyewitness testimony. Let's bring in our think tank, see what they have to say about all this tonight. Joining us tonight, criminal defense attorney Eklund Mercy. Also with us, retired criminal defense attorney Kirk Nurmi, and former federal prosecutor Nima Rahmani. Welcome.
I was going to say, they got to have a prosecutor on too, right?
So how effective is all of this, putting all of this together where the eyewitnesses are seeing the bridge guy in the vicinity in the same time that they're seeing Abby and Libby? Eklund, I think this is absolutely crucial.
Yeah, and I think it doesn't help the prosecution much, because it's the next question I'm going to ask is, what did you do after you saw a bloody, muddy man? Did you call the authorities?
No, she didn't contact anyone until like 3 weeks later.
Yeah, and that's my problem there. And then we have the bridge guy.
Yeah.
The issue is that the defendant
that witness was a big L.
Distinct facial feature, like he has a very distinct beard, and regardless if you're muddy or bloody or what have you.
We have to be honest here, Eklund. However he looks in this photo is 5 years after the double murder. This thing wasn't solved overnight. Should have been solved overnight if they believe Richard Allen is the one, because a couple days after it happened, he called in and said, I was there, but for whatever reason, there was no follow-up, and they cleared him. So, I mean, beards can grow. Like Nima's beard is always the same. I don't know what that is. I don't know. I don't know how he does that. I don't know if it's a filter on the camera or something, but it's always perfect. But other people's, their beards grow and shrink.
But as distinct his beard is, it just seems that if somebody were to talk,
I don't think it's really distinct. I mean, I know at least 3 or 4 people in my personal life that have that
I was like, oh, the beard
goatee.
So that's a very distinct feature. That's a very distinct thing. If I could see blood and mud, then I could see beard. So I think that's going to be an issue. And then
he was calling it a beard, but it's a goatee.
Why were you recording at that time? Like, what were you doing at that time? So unless they set proper foundations to really confirm the veracity or the, just how.
So clearly she's a defense attorney. I think, they obviously said that at the beginning, but she's going to naturally try to defend, that's her job. Here's the problem with her case is she thinks that, why are you recording? Well, because you're out with your best friend, you're going on a hike, beautiful scenery. You're also a 13 and 14-year-old girl. You're going to record, that's not out of the ordinary. And him having a goatee isn't out of the ordinary. Like I said, I know 3 people with the exact same goatee as this guy. So it's not a distinct feature.
sure the witnesses are. I would
Now,
need
if he
that
had like a limp or something,
Let's
that's
get right to what
distinct.
Eklund's talking about, because Betsy Blair described the bridge guy, and they had an artist draw a picture that looks like Justin Timberlake. What are your thoughts here? This white male, age 20, brown curly hair, medium build. This is Betsy Blair. This is one of the witnesses who's walking on the bridge and sees the bridge guy, and that's the bridge. That's not Richard Allen.
No, it's not.
No, and what we're seeing here, you mentioned in the open there about 5 years to solve this case, and this is one of the reasons probably for that, because we have this correlation. I disagree with Eklund. I think when we have bridge guy and the victims in this case in proximity around the time that her phone stops moving, we certainly have a correlation between the girls and bridge guy. And then if we combine that with the bullet found near the scene that's tied to Mr. Allen, we know that there's further correlation to him. But that's what some of the things that make this not such a tight case, and why it took 5 years is it gives the defense opening, because it's circumstantial, and bridge guy, as you said, is
So this
not
is another
Richard Allen.
defense attorney.
And I'm sure we heard the defense probably, well, we didn't get to hear the defense, but the defense probably pointed that out several times, that this guy does not fit the description of Mr. Allen.
Yeah,
So
but
that's why the
unfortunately,
time frame isn't so tight.
Yeah, the judge didn't allow the sketches in, but only the descriptions by the people who described it to the artist. So Nima, by the way, this next sketch, this beard more closely resembles yours, because this is from the muddy and bloody witness, Sarah Carbaugh. This is what she described when she sat down with the artist, and that looks nothing like number 2, but arguably a little bit closer to Richard Allen.
Yeah.
And this
This is the one that I
seen
think looks like
walking
Richard
on
Allen.
300 North. What do you think about establishing that Richard Allen is bridge guy and bridge guy is the killer?
Well, that's the only way the defense can really defend this case, say that Allen is neither bridge guy, or he is, but bridge guy didn't kill Abby and Libby. And we've talked a lot about how eyewitness identification
This is the
not
prosecutor.
accurate, but what is accurate is that Snapchat video. And there's a reason that law enforcement released it, and we spent years on this show talking about that video and down the hill and trying to say, is Allen's voice the voice of the person in the video? Is that individual wearing
That's
the
it.
jeans and the
I've
jacket,
never heard
is that
Richard Allen talk.
So I would set these sketches aside and I'd focus on the video, because of course the eyewitness testimony may not be the most accurate, but that video doesn't lie.
Yeah, as we put the sketch next to Nima, I was like, if we put one of those little, old-time newsy hats on him, like it could be him. So I just want to do this, Eklund. We have like 30 seconds after I lay this out. But that witness, the muddy and bloody witness you have a problem with, there are some problems. She said there was mud all over, blood spatter on the lower pants only. She contacted police 3 weeks later because she was freaked out by what she saw. The defense points out that Carbaugh said mud 11 times in her first interview with law enforcement, but never said blood. And the defense points out in a second interview, she said mud 13 times, but never said blood, and then got argumentative. So do you think that if she's talking about blood at the trial, but not talking about blood in the first 2 interviews, that that's a big problem?
Absolutely. Because of the 3 weeks.
I don't know if it's a problem.
Already the testimony is bad because it's been 3 weeks, and then now you
that's
add,
bad. That hurts her case.
The added caveat, which
Yeah,
is
that would-
I had blood one time and blood the second. The word blood is very important, and I think
That's true.
really kind of
That'd be a distinct
discredits
feature
that
that you should have.
I think because there's so many things going on.
And really what's happening in here, and the way they're trying this case, is they're saying A equals B, right? B equals C, therefore A equals C. And that's it, if they can get to the A equals C. Because they're saying they saw the bridge guy, then they're saying the bridge guy is in fact Richard Allen, and therefore the killer is Richard Allen. We shall say. Think Tank staying with us. When we come back, we're going to talk about what the jury didn't get to hear about. The Odenists. Was it a fair trial without the defense presenting their theory of the case?
Richard Allen, you child murderer! Why did you do it? Shame
See, if
on
they
you!
can't, if the defense can't defend themselves the way they want to, I don't know if it's really fair.
You
My
had
opinion.
not heard of Odinism?
I thought it was hocus pocus. I honestly didn't. I'd never heard of it. And the more I got into it, that's a real thing. It is a real thing, and it's scary. I believe they sacrificed a girl and killed another one.
Odinism is real,
Yeah.
but it wasn't a part of the Delphi murders trial. It was the defense to the case. It was the defense of the case. There was a faction of the task force that was investigating this when it was still a mystery that believed this was a ritualistic killing by Odinists. Absolutely believed it. None of that testimony permitted by the judge. So what is Odinism? It's a Norse pagan religion hijacked by white nationalists. That's what the defense has said. Take a look, because what I have here is the description of how Abby and Libby were found at the scene. And based upon that description, we put together these images. And what the defense was talking about was the arrangement of the sticks, that it would mean something next to a tree, and some of the markings in blood on the tree together were part of this ritualistic killing of these two young girls. And there were other people involved as suspects that were investigated by that task force, and the defense latched onto that and believed that was a big part of this case. But again, prohibited from bringing any of that testimony. Then the evidence shows, and the defense pointed this out, during his pretrial incarceration at the Westville Correctional Facility, Richard Allen was monitored, intimidated, and mentally abused by correctional officers who were members of the Odinite cult. The Westville Corrections officers boldly wore patches on their DOC uniforms that proclaimed, "In Odin we trust," along with another patch. And when they made this allegation, we're like, are you kidding me? And then the state's response, oh yeah, both Sergeant Blank and Sergeant Blank have worn patches that refer to Odinism. These patches reflect Sergeant Blank's and Sergeant Blank's religious beliefs and are not associated with any kind of a cult. So Odinism is real. The people who are watching him pre-trial when he's doing all these confessions were Odinists, but the jury knows nothing about any of it. Let's bring back our think tank. Eklund Mercy, Kirk Nurmi, and Nima Rahmani with us. Kirk, you know, it's not like the defense grabbed this out of some place and made it up. It was in the discovery. It was part of the task force investigation. Then it was part of what was happening in the correctional facility. How shocked are you?
Yeah, it should have been used in trial. It should have.
Make this trial unfair from your perspective in any way?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more than shocking. It's downright repulsive. The idea that in America, first of all, we're going to prohibit someone who has a Sixth Amendment right to defend themselves the opportunity to do so. And as you said, it wasn't as if they were just making this up. It's a real situation. It was thought of as a theory by investigators. You know that it's in some of the discovery. So this idea that the judge cut off somebody's Sixth Amendment rights is repulsive. I mean, obviously she's maybe not a fan of the First Amendment. And also when we talk about the denial of Sixth Amendment rights, we cannot forget that the torturous environment that we were talking about in the earlier segment with Bob Mata about the hood over the head, the pictures that Barbara mentioned, things of that nature. Getting a confession of that nature is something that we've rejected under the Eighth Amendment. So I think there's going to be a lot of problems with the trial, and it does begin with the Odinism and the denial of that defense.
Nima, former federal prosecutor, was this fair?
It wasn't, Vinny, and I've been on court TV many times, and I've said that I think Richard Allen has a much better chance on appeal than he does at this trial. I do not think the jurors are going to return a not guilty verdict. I don't think they're going to hang either, but the defense should be able to present their alternate theory of the case. It could be weird, it could be bonkers, it could be conspiracy theory, it doesn't matter. If you're a prosecutor, argue the case straight up. Don't cut out the defense's legs from under them. Let them point to someone else. And I think this does explain, I don't agree with it, why the defense thinks the 60 admissions or confessions were coerced by the prison guards. So let them argue their case. I think the trial judge made a mistake here. We may have to retry this case all over as a result.
Yeah,
I think that's what's going to happen too.
I was shocked when none of this became part of the case. We have about 25 seconds left here. Does this now make this an unfair case and set up Richard Allen for a potential appeal wherever it goes?
Yeah, he's going to appeal
because, you know, just based off of the town and how small it is, and just if you have officers who are actively participating in it, so it's not shocking. But I do believe that it's just not.
I think it is
the
shocking, to be
prosecution
honest.
has the statute of limitation is there is no statute of limitation on murder, and for you to expect the jury to do your case for you, that's the problem. I think that's the shock.
Yeah, I think if you have the evidence as a prosecutor, it doesn't matter what the other side has. You have the evidence, you just prove it. Anyway, Eckler Mercy, Kirk Dermy, Nima Romani, thank you so much. Great to see you all. When we come back, I'll reveal something else you need to know tonight.
Join Court TV's Vinny Politan with the latest and breaking true crime stories.
Now, let's look at the other side of all of that.
Vinny Politan Investigates, coming up next, only on Court TV.
What happened that night?
Killed my wife. I don't remember none of that.
If you were me, would you believe you?
Interview with a Killer, Sunday, 8/7 Central, only on Court TV.
Welcome back. Time to reveal something else you need to know tonight. Let's take a look at the big board. And there we have a death penalty suit for the accused Idaho student's killer. The judge ruled that he will be able to wear civilian clothes for all pre-trial hearings in his death penalty case, and obviously will be able to wear it in front of the jury. In the meantime, his defense attorney's trying to get...
All right, so the rest of this video is just something we need to know. All right. Alright, this is the live verdict video. This one is going to be long. Might skip. Might skip through it, but one thing's for certain, before we get into this, I am going to take a quick break, go to the bathroom, get you know, maybe some water or something. And then I will be back to finish this up with the verdict, Indiana versus Richard Allen. So I'll be right back, and stay tuned. Alright, chat. I'm back. Alright, this could be a doozy. This very long video. I'm gonna try to get through it the best I can. If there's parts where I can go forward a little bit, I'm going to. Also had to get pants because it's freezing in my room here. But yeah. So if there's parts that I can fast forward, I'll fast forward through. If we've already heard some of the stuff, but this is the actual verdict of the Richard Allen case. So let's get into it. Built it up all the way to this point. Let's finish it out. I guess we don't have to watch this. There we go.
Verdict coverage in the Delphi Murders case. There you see the door to the courthouse, which is open on this Veterans Day for just one case, the Delphi Murders trial. The jury has reached a verdict. Barbara McDonald from Court TV is inside the courtroom waiting for that verdict to be read. Once it's read, she'll come out of that door. She'll come to our cameras and our microphones, and she will deliver the verdict for us. In the meantime, if you take a look at the scene, they need to tilt that camera down just a little bit for us. If you look at the scene at the courthouse, this is bizarre. Like, courthouses are public property, ladies and gentlemen, just so you know. Courthouses are public property, but for some reason in Indiana, get off my lawn seems to be the order of the day. Everyone has to stay on the sidewalk. I don't know why.
That's insane.
But that's just the rules. I guess they're keeping law and order in this small town of Delphi, where it took them 5 years to solve a case where the man they arrested 2 days after the murders told investigators he was there. And they did no further investigation of him, amazingly, until like 7 years later. Welcome back. I'm Vinny Politan with our special coverage today. With me here on the big desk to help deliver this verdict is Court TV's Ted Rollins as well. Ted, what do you think first of the scene at the courthouse today? Like, I get it, you don't want cameras, but like no one on the lawn. Wait till we tell you to line up, There's like, it just looks like it's a bit too much in a public trial in a public courthouse.
Yeah, we've seen this play out, both you and I. Depends on where you are. I think the smaller town, the more ripe you are for this sort of, you do this, you do that. But hey, let's face it, they haven't dealt with it a lot, and this is just their way of keeping everything in order and in control in an uncontrollable scenario that they didn't see coming. And to this community, it has been a horrible roller coaster. 8 years.
Yeah.
And you think back when this first broke, the entire country was glued to it, and it was, I remember thinking, it's going to be a matter of days. Then they're going to have somebody. I mean, there's no way they're not going to solve this, a double murder of these 2 little girls. And then it took 5 years, and there was nothing. And, oh, there were things, but not Richard Allen. There were different people, different suspects. And so I guess Delphi gets a little bit of a pass if they're overreacting on the courthouse. I don't know.
I get that, except I look at the way this whole thing has transpired, right? And
yes,
this is obviously the highest profile case, but there's a madman loose in this small town, right? Takes 2 innocent young girls. Everyone's got to be terrified. 2 days after, the person they say, no doubt, is the killer, tells investigators he's there. Tells them he's there. There's a report written on this, and they don't even talk to him, interview him, or do any follow-up for 5 years until a clerk is scanning some of the papers and takes a look at it and says, oh, maybe I should show this to the detectives. A middle-aged man who said he was there that day. Like, how long was the list? The list had to be tiny, and he put himself on the list, but they completely ignored it.
So you have to believe that they've had some soul searching, and that this was a bungled investigation, and they know it.
Yeah, I would say.
Now they're having to, first of all, they had to get him to confess to get to this point in this trial where now we think he's guilty. You take the confessions out of this,
No, I think there's still enough without the confessions.
The bullet?
But you've got, he puts himself there. This is what I'll do. Gray Hughes, explain to Ted from your perspective, your theory on how you could convict Richard Allen without the confessions, but with his statements saying and putting himself at the scene.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I actually, whenever I tell this story on my show using the map, I always forget about the bullet. And I don't even mention the confessions at all. Because the thing is Richard Allen said he got there from 1:30 to 3:30. He lied when he said it was 12 to 1:30 because those same three girls were on the trails during that time, and they didn't see him. They only saw him when they were leaving, and they have a photograph at 1:26 as they're leaving. Richard Allen's vehicle drives by the Hoosier Harvest Store or a vehicle that matches his, parks the car, and then he says he got to the trail at 1:30. He passes the three girls. They see him, and he sees them. So that right there, he's locked in as that guy. And that guy, they all said, looked like the same person in Libby's video. Then it takes 11 minutes to walk to the bridge. And that would put him at the bridge at about 1:40.
Here's my thing with that, those 5 years after. I don't know.
So he'd be at 1:45, and then Betsy Blair drives her vehicle and parks at the parking spot and goes onto the trail immediately, and Richard Allen would have had no time to have ran past Betsy Blair because she went right to the bridge, and guess what? She sees Richard Allen, or bridge guy, whatever you want to call him, standing on platform 1, exactly where Richard Allen said he was standing, wearing exactly the same clothing that the bridge guy was wearing. He said he was wearing blue jeans,
blue jacket,
blue and black Carhartt jacket, with a hoodie and some sort of head covering, maybe like a skull cap, okay? And then Betsy Blair turns around after seeing Richard Allen standing there, walks back down the trail and passes Abby and Libby, and Abby and Libby, therefore, are going to run into Richard Allen right there. Then you see the video at the end of the bridge where it shows a person wearing exactly the same clothing that Richard Allen said he was wearing. There is no reasonable explanation at all that there was another person on a Monday afternoon at 1:30, a day that he happened to have off, and nobody else, like that's a work day. And there's this guy wearing exactly the same clothing that he said he was wearing. And when he was shown a picture, by the way, of Bridge Guy, they asked him, is this you? And he goes, well, it's not me. If the girl took that picture, it's not me, which really means that looks exactly like me. And if a different camera took that picture, I would say, yes, that's me. I mean, this is like, to me, this is the most simple.
Yeah.
And right at that point, it's already, Richard Allen is the guy that said down the hill and took them down the hill. And that makes him at least responsible for kidnapping and taking them to the crime scene. And then, oh, by the way, the bullet that he said he ejected in one of his confessions at the end of the bridge, they find sitting at the crime scene, and it's linked to his gun with ejection marks. All right, and he's confessed. I mean, like, it's just, he confessed in a rational way.
Well, let's do this. Let's do this. I want to leave the confessions off the table. So let's go around the horn. Philip Dubé, could this case be made without the confessions?
Never. In fact, I'm not even sure that a grand jury would have indicted. It's only enough to prove presence. That's it. It does not prove commission of the homicides. If they would have had, for example, some forensics of the girl's blood on his Carhartt
is this a defense guy?
Cap, or they found his DNA under one of the girl's fingernails, or found a hair follicle of his on one of the girls, then he's finished, obviously, because it was direct contact. But the mere presence of a dry, spent shell casing is not enough to even file, in my opinion. That's just my opinion. And if I were a surrogate deputized DA for the day, I would reject the case, and I would tell detectives to go out, beat the bushes, and get me more evidence.
That's never happening. You will never be a prosecutor. Marie Pereira, could this case be made without the confessions?
No, I agree with Philip 100%. It couldn't be made. And I disagree with Gray that the confession is cut and dry. He confessed to a lot of things. And let's talk about the feces. Come on. This is a person who confessed. He said he molested them. There was sexual assault. There was not. He said he assaulted his daughter. That didn't happen. The man was not well. So this is a case that relies heavily on a confession that is suspect because the confession is basically full of feces. It doesn't matter about the confession right now. And this is what the case is grounded in. The testimony of
he
those
looks
eyewitnesses
abused in
5
this picture.
years later, there's room for reasonable doubt there too. The length of time it took them to investigate really denigrates that eyewitness testimony from the people who said just you, Gray, saying the timing and everything, how it happened was confusing to me. So to the jurors, I'm sure.
This is what we're going to do. I understand it's a little confusing. I'm going to put together, we have a little map that we'll show you after the break, Marie, and we'll kind of flush it out a little bit. Ted Rowlands, your thoughts. Could this case be made now, do you think, without the confessions? If the jury takes the confession and says, listen, I'm not comfortable with them, they're all after he's arrested for the murders. Are you comfortable?
No, I don't think they come back with a guilty verdict with just his presence being there.
And the shell casing.
The bullet.
Yeah, the whole thing, the shell casing, the bullet, all together with the marks.
It's a much different case. Absolutely. If you're actually saying, Gray, that this is just a strong case without the confessions, well, then why did they ship him to Guantanamo Bay and turn him in and make him confess, basically, is what happened. Why would he go and be put in solitary confinement in a prison unless they were after exactly what they got, and that is a confession, turns out multiple.
All right, I can't leave it hanging there. Gray, you want to respond?
Yeah. So I guess psychosis makes somebody psychic. You know, I didn't realize that when you have psychosis that you can actually see into the mind of the actual killer and see this white van driving on a private drive that nobody on the planet knew about other than Richard Allen and perhaps the guy driving the van, okay? So I didn't know that existed. And by the way, I believe Richard Allen was completely, he was eating, he was exercising, etc. Then he confessed to his wife, and he begged them to believe him. And then the attorneys got involved. And don't you think it's interesting that some of the, quote, false confessions involve family members that they knew would come back and say, no, he didn't do that. Plus, they're biased towards him. So obviously, if his attorneys got involved for future confessions, you want to muck up the original ones that were completely said under no duress.
You know what, chat? Actually, I'm feeling a little bit tired, and we're only 15 minutes into this video. And I've already been live for 3 hours now. Let's save this for tomorrow. So I wasn't going to stream tomorrow, but I think I'm going to stream this tomorrow. When I'm more awake and alert and assertive. And we'll just kind of end the live there. But I will save this video for tomorrow. We'll start it over from the beginning so I can kind of dive into it. I think the first 3 videos were very interesting as far as like explaining the case, seeing when they were talking about how Abby and Libby were killed. Very disturbing and graphic. And then, the previous video we just watched, Richard Allen guilty or not guilty. I think that's kind of the question everybody has, and that's what this is all about. Here's my opinion so far. We've seen this in the past in some cases. Most famously, I think it was that guy that was in jail for like, I don't know, 30 years or something, or 40 years. And there was like a new or the district attorneys or whatever, that reopened the case and found out that he was not guilty for murder this whole time. It was that Netflix documentary there. So we've seen some stuff like this in the past where we don't necessarily know, or, that Richard Allen could get out, and if he's not guilty. I do think it's odd. I do think it's odd that in the previous video, they talked to the two people that were in the courtroom during the proceedings. And in the courtroom, they said that the full video has not been released to the public, obviously, but the full video is 43 seconds long. They played it in court. And I find it interesting that I keep bringing it back to the fact that the guy said that it would take that Richard Allen, if that is Richard Allen in the video, that he was so far back from, these girls, that he would have had to have sprinted across a rickety bridge to catch up to them and to say down the hill. He also said in the video that you don't see this man's mouth moving at all. So that's another thing that we kind of, is up in the air here. The defense is saying it's a satanic cult. Or not satanic, Odiism cult. And it could be. It could be. This verdict obviously can be overturned if he files for an appeal, which I believe he will. And we'll have to maybe have another appeal hearing, and hopefully that'll be made public, so they can get some cameras in there, and we can watch it. So yeah. So like I said, tomorrow we're gonna dive back into this video. I'll restart it, and we'll get into the full hour and 47 minutes of it. I wish I could do it tonight, but I didn't realize when I added the other. Originally, it was going to be another video we were watching. I found out that video had copyright issues, and I just didn't want to deal with that. Court TV does not. So, if you guys want to watch it on your own, it's on Court TV. It was streamed yesterday. Well, on the 11th. But we are going to be watching it tomorrow. Trying to see a time frame for that. Maybe I'll do earlier tomorrow. I don't know an exact time frame yet. Maybe early in the morning we can do that, and we can just, maybe 10 o'clock. But yeah, so I'm gonna lock in maybe around 10. I know it's weird saying locked in and then say maybe, but I'm gonna lock in for around 10 o'clock, 10:30. We're gonna watch this full, 2 hours, might be 2 hours, and then go from there. And I'm gonna get off, and I definitely gotta edit some videos and stream them or post them so we can get back to our YouTube videos that we were posting. I'm gonna do maybe a lot more, or a couple more like off camera, or off live reaction videos. I gotta figure out some shorts I want to do, but that's gonna be all tomorrow. Again, probably around 10:30, and hopefully, or 10:30, we'll get through this video, and then, yeah, I'll have my reactions at the end of the video, and probably throughout. But anyway, appreciate everybody that came in, and just thank you for all the support. I appreciate it, and I'll catch you guys tomorrow. And we'll finish this out. All right, peace.